The story opens with a quiet moment, his daughter playing on a swing. She innocently mentions her teacher asked why he never attended school meetings. To protect his honor, she would explain that her father was a legendary god of war, now bound to a chair by the scars of battle. But this revelation only made her a target for torment. Her mother also endured cruel whispers, and the little girl, feeling helpless, would see her crying in the shadows of the night. All she wanted was for her father, Linfung, to finally awaken. Trapped within his own body, he could feel his daughter's every tear and see the desperate hope burning in her eyes. Suddenly, a boy her age appeared, sneering at her. "Crying again," he mocked. She tried to ignore the taunt, but he spat a venomous lie, accusing her mother of using a crippled man. Those words ignited a fire in Rui's heart. She launched herself off the swing, charging straight for Zhou Xiao. A furious cry tore from her lips, vowing he would regret ever insulting her parents. But Xiu, being much larger, shoved her with contemptuous ease, sending her sprawling to the ground. Her head cracked against the metal swing. The boy just laughed at her pain, and then spat on her. Lying in the dirt, Rui's hands tore at the grass, her small body trembling with uncontrollable rage as he called her a little animal. Pushed beyond her limit, she lunged like a predator and sank her teeth into his hand. The bully's parents were nearby. Seeing her precious son being attacked, the mother rushed in, kicking Rui and screaming that she was a wild, uneducated beast. Thrown to the ground once more, Rui glared up at the woman, whose cruelty surpassed even her son's. The woman grabbed Rui, ignoring her cries, and dragged her before Zhao. She slammed the girl down, demanding that she kneel and apologize. From his wheelchair, the main character watched. A volcanic rage brewed inside him, his dormant energy boiling at this unforgivable injustice. Pure fury and the primal instinct to protect his child surged through his paralyzed body. Rui couldn't understand. Why should she apologize to the very person who had defiled her father's name? Just then, Xiao's father intervened. He yanked the girl's head back by her ponytail, trying to force her to bow. Still, Rui resisted. The woman's palm cracked across her face. Her eyes filled with scorn as she hissed, "Are you sure you won't apologize?" Facing two adults, Rui's spirit refused to shatter. She would not bow. Xiao's father raised his hand to strike again, shouting that he'd teach her a lesson. But to everyone's utter shock, his hand was stopped dead in midair. Lin's grip was like iron. His voice, cold as the grave, echoed, "How dare you touch my daughter?" On that day, the slumbering hero's power was unleashed. He declared that from this moment on, anyone who laid a hand on his daughter would be executed. Moments before, Xiao's father had felt superior. Now, he knew his life was hanging by a thread. Lin would never again permit his family's humiliation. He slammed the man to the ground, while Xiao and his mother stood frozen, helpless in their terror, terrified for her husband. The woman desperately searched for a way to intervene. She rushed at Lin, beating his back with her fists and screaming for him to release her husband. She even threatened to call the police, but Lin didn't allow her to finish. A single backhand sent her flying with brutal force. As she crashed to the grass, Lin's voice cut through the air. "You dared to strike my child!" A terrifying aura of rage poured from him as he ordered them to burn this day into their memory, for he was granting them the mercy of keeping their lives. As he dealt with these thugs, his mind flashed back to the battlefield, to a time he stood alone against a sea of soldiers. The last warrior standing breathed heavily, his body a canvas of wounds and exhaustion. Suddenly, a voice echoed, praising his strength, saying he alone could inspire an army of 10,000. Lin's gaze snapped toward the sound as more elite warriors descended. They declared his victory would not come so easily. One soldier stepped forward, acknowledging Lin's title. "But today," he proclaimed, "you shall fall at the hands of the 7 sons of the Western Alliance." Hearing their arrogant boast, Lin simply smirked. He raised his spear, his resolve like unbreakable steel. He let out a mighty roar, proclaiming that after fighting for 6 long years, he had no reason to fear the likes of them. The Alliance leader charged forward, his strike filled with deadly intent. Warriors swarmed Lin in a tempest of flashing steel, determined to give him no chance of survival. But Lin moved like a phantom, slipping past the blade's edge. Even so, the shaft of a spear slammed into his body. Yet he remained completely unshaken. With a swift counter, Lin hurled one of the Alliance members away with the immense power of his spear. From behind, the leader closed in for the final blow, convinced victory was his. But Lin's reaction was faster than lightning. His spear pierced straight through the enemy's body, and crimson spilled from the man's mouth. As disbelief filled the man's eyes, Lin coldly informed him he was too weak, and that an army of 10,000 could never push him back a single step. At that very moment, the 3 remaining members charged, now only a meter from his position. A storm of steel erupted from Lin, his voice as cold as his blade as he declared their fate was their own to bear. His spear danced a song of death, too swift for mortal eyes to follow. Only as life faded did they grasp the inevitable. His crushing might was an unstoppable tide. When the dust finally settled, Lin stood alone upon the battlefield once more. This was his sworn purpose to forge order from the nation's chaos, believing it was the only path to bring peace to his home. But victory always comes at a price. His body was a canvas of pain, his spirit weary. Still, he could not afford the luxury of collapse. His daughter's life depended on a bone marrow transplant. A tiny voice suddenly shattered his war-torn memories. It was Rai, her voice trembling as she clung to him, crying out for her papa. Pure joy flooded Lin's soul as he swept his daughter into his arms. She stared up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Meanwhile, a vow echoed from the past to annihilate the entire Xiao clan if they dared defy him. The terrified family had submitted without question, bowing endlessly, their apologies laced with desperation. Rai wept, whispering how everyone seemed to hate her father. But Lin held her tight, swearing an oath that no one would ever harm their family again. Her tears continued to fall, heartbroken that no one else could see the hero she saw. He listened intently, but his gaze sharpened when he saw she hadn't fully recovered from her illness. A deep worry coiled in his gut. He had to be her pillar of strength. Yet the perceptive child sensed his struggle and asked to be put down. He gently placed her on her feet, promising her everything was fine. He stroked her hair, telling her they would go home. But Rai delivered a cruel truth. Their own grandmother had cast them out, forbidding their return. It was also her mother could meet with the son of some uncle. Lin's expression hardened. His instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Rai leaned in close, whispering a clever plan for him to feign his catatonic state. A proud smile touched his lips. He would play his part. He slumped back into the wheelchair, his body going limp. Right on cue, Rai let out a piercing scream, blaming the Gasco family's assault for his sudden relapse. She whirled on the frightened couple, shouting that her uncle would soon arrive to deliver their judgment. She pushed her father toward the main house while Shiai's parents trembled, expecting to be ruined by demands for compensation. Finally, they reached the entrance. A blonde woman stood in the hall, her face a mask of utter disgust. Her voice dripped with venom as she reminded Rai she was forbidden from bringing that man back without permission. Rai hid behind the wheelchair, but her voice was steady as she told her grandmother that they were both just exhausted. The woman's heart was made of stone. "Silence," she snapped, then pointed a trembling finger at Lin, screaming that Rai was never to call that thing her father. The little girl stood her ground, declaring he would always be her father. Just then, a strange man's voice echoed, speaking of the honor of spending a lifetime with Shinn. A tall, imposing man emerged from the house. Lin's gaze turned icy as his daughter whispered this was the man from the phone call. At that moment, his wife Shinn appeared, beautiful and visibly distressed. Shinn stated she needed more time to consider the marriage proposal. Sun agreed with a confident smile, certain he would win her over. But as he turned, he saw a man in a wheelchair and a small child blocking his path. He recognized her in an instant. This had to be Shinn's daughter. Sun approached with a patronizing grin, pinching the girl's cheeks. Just then, the grandmother ordered Shinn to escort him out, but she flatly refused. Rai's grandmother hurried after Sun herself, desperate to know how the meeting went, abandoning her distraught daughter. Taking it all in, Rai whispered to her father that this man was trying to steal their mommy away. Just then, her mother approached, her touch infinitely gentle as she took Rai's small hands. Shinn thanked her for taking care of her father. The girl's composure broke as she asked if her mother was truly finding her a new dad. Shinn promised her fiercely that such a thing would never happen. Wiping away the tears, she noticed a small mark on Rai's face and asked if she had been fighting. Rai lied, not wanting to add to her mother's pain. Afterward, Shinn brought her husband and daughter home. Rai was sent to her room, leaving the couple shrouded in a heavy silence. Shinn sat on the edge of the bed beside Lin's still form, crushed by the weight of an impossible choice. Lin held his breath, wondering if she knew he was awake. She began to speak softly, confessing her thoughts to the man she believed couldn't hear her. Her words pierced his heart, and it took every ounce of his will to remain motionless. With tears streaming down her face, she gently stroked his hair, whispering that Rai was only alive because he had sacrificed everything for her. She confessed that all she ever wanted was for their daughter to have a strong, happy family. Then came the soul-crushing truth she was willing to marry Sun if it guaranteed their child a good life. A devastating choice, but one she had to confess to the man she loved most. Rising to her feet, she offered a sincere apology to the silent protagonist and turned to leave. Lin's thoughts then turned to his wife, and all the pain she must have endured while he was lost to the world. Suddenly, a sharp knock shattered the fragile peace. He realized he was not alone. From the bathroom emerged Jang, Shinn's own younger sister. She casually remarked that Lin had no idea his wife was about to be married. He never expected to see her, but his face remained a mask of stone. Inside Jang, a storm of fury was brewing. Jang sauntered to his wheelchair, tossed a towel aside, and grabbed his chin. lamenting what a waste of a handsome face this was. A sudden ringtone cut through the tension, distracting her. She flopped onto the bed and greeted her future brother-in-law. She answered the call, her bare feet dangling just in front of Lin. He recalled she was still just in a towel, but forced his attention to the conversation. On the other end, Sun asked if her sister had accepted his gifts. Jang replied that she hadn't, but purred that sooner or later her sister would belong to Sun completely. The man seemed doubtful, so he offered to buy her anything she desired. Those were the magic words she had been waiting for. Without hesitation, she demanded a designer bag and a new pair of shoes. Sun promised her everything, if she would just do one thing for him. Jang eagerly agreed, heading for her sister's closet. She promised she would do whatever he asked. After slipping into a blouse, she told her future brother-in-law to replace Shinn's entire wardrobe once they were married. Then she left, leaving Lin alone, processing the venom he had just heard. The bitter truth was a dagger in his heart. Shinn was being forced into this marriage, all to secure a future for their daughter. The window stood open, the curtains dancing softly in the light breeze. Suddenly, a figure materialized before his wheelchair. The girl bowed low, saying she was overjoyed he had finally awakened. Lin recognized her as Xiaowing and asked why she wasn't guarding the border. Without lifting her gaze, the girl admitted that her master was now far more important. Besides, after their last great battle, no enemy dared to even approach it. Lin listened carefully to his subordinate, and then asked if she had other news for him. Xiaowing's expression turned grave as she revealed that for the past 2 years, vultures had been circling him, desperate to take his wife. She confessed that without his direct order, her hands were tied, and she could not move against them. Now, she asked for his permission to eliminate every last one of those villains. As Lin listened, a terrifying rage began to emanate from him. He understood now. While he lay helpless, his enemies had crept far too close. But his main target was the man named Sun. He ordered Xiaowing to gather every piece of information she could find on him. She accepted the command without a shred of hesitation, promising to begin immediately and deliver her findings as soon as possible. As silently as she arrived, the loyal subordinate vanished through the window, disappearing back into the shadows. Left alone once more, Lin's silence was soon broken. The door burst open, and little Ray ran in, her face glowing with pure happiness. She excitedly told her mother about the fairy tale, how the prince kisses Sleeping Beauty, and she wakes up with an innocent smile. Ray promised with all her heart that if her mother just kissed her father, he would wake up too. Shinn was at a loss for words, but looking into her daughter's pleading eyes, she found herself seriously considering it. Leaning down, she gently explained it was only a story. But Ray knew the truth, that her father was already awake, and she wanted her mother to discover it in this magical way. The girl insisted, urging her mother to just try. Shinn, though doubtful, could not refuse her daughter's earnest plea and finally agreed. Slowly, she approached her husband, studying the face she loved so dearly. It had been so long since Lin had seen her this close. She leaned in, pouring all her love into the kiss, clinging to the fragile hope that he would truly wake up. Ray peeked through her fingers, expecting to see her father's eyes open and her mother's face burst with joy. But nothing happened. Lin remained perfectly still. Shinn turned to her daughter with a pained expression, whispering that Daddy didn't wake up, and that fairy tales weren't real. Ray was crushed. She couldn't understand why her father wouldn't reveal the truth. Shinn took her hand, and with a trembling voice, promised she would find them a new father to take care of them. But those words only ignited Ray's fury. She screamed that her mother was a liar, reminding her of the promise that no one would ever replace her real father. Sobbing, Ray clutched her father's hand, desperately trying to pull him up, begging him to wake up. Shinn turned away, unable to watch through her own tears. The little girl was certain he could hear her, pleading for him to tell her mother he had recovered. Inside, Lin fought every instinct to move. It was shattering his heart, but he could only apologize to his daughter in his mind. He had to keep pretending, because revealing himself now would put everything at risk. But when Ray saw no reaction at all, her sobs grew louder with despair. She yelled that he was a liar, just like her mother. Shinn was forced to carry her from the room, asking her not to shout at her father. Rai reeled in disbelief. How could her father let her mother just replace him? The grueling day finally crawled to a close. A deep darkness enveloped the house. Only one room held back the shadows, lit by a single, lonely lamp. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Rai, tears still staining her cheeks as she murmured about the liars who surrounded her. Beside her, Shinn sat in silence, her heart heavy with crushing guilt. In that quiet moment of despair, the door creaked open. Jang stood silhouetted in the doorway. She reminded Shinn about the banquet, demanding to know why she was still at home. But her older sister gave no response. Jang grabbed her sister's hand, insisting they leave immediately. She pushed, saying after marrying Sun, Rai could have anything her heart desired. Shinn, thinking only of her daughter crying herself to sleep every night, reluctantly agreed. For Rai's sake, she would go. Meanwhile, back in Lin's room, Chin slipped through the window like a shadow. In her hand, she held an envelope. She addressed him as master. She had gathered all the information on Sun, just as he commanded. She handed him the envelope, reminding him it was Ginseng's birthday. Sun was hosting a banquet at the Jiangzhou Hotel, and Shin would be there in about 40 minutes. Lin took the envelope. He thanked his most trusted subordinate and carefully broke the seal. As his eyes scanned the report, his expression grew colder. He couldn't believe the depths of depravity Sun's family would sink to. He rose from his wheelchair, a dangerous aura surrounding him. He commanded Chin to prepare. They were going to the birthday party. At the Grand Hotel, the two sisters arrived right on time. A smiling staff member welcomed them warmly, confirming the reservation under Sun's name. They were immediately escorted to a private, lavishly prepared room. Entering the main hall, Zhang's jaw dropped at the lavish decorations. She excitedly pointed out the massive birthday arch, but Shin couldn't shake a feeling of dread. A man adjusting his glasses remarked how his father had booked the entire hotel just for this. Zhang immediately rushed to her future brother-in-law's side, laughing in agreement. Then, the soft echo of footsteps. A little girl was walking toward Shin. In her hands, she carried a velvet box holding a magnificent ring. Zhang's eyes nearly popped out when she saw the massive diamond. Then, Sun knelt before Shin, presenting the ring. He asked her to marry him. The staff whispered in awe, stunned by the sheer cost of this engagement. Sun promised to care for her and her family, his eyes filled with expectation. But for Shin, the weight of the decision was crushing her. She felt her spirit tearing in two as she remained silent. Nearby, hidden by the piano, Lin and Chin watched every move. Chin asked if it was time to intervene and remove the arrogant man, but Lin held her back, telling her to wait. His eyes fixed on his wife. Finally, Shin pulled her hand away. She told Sun the proposal was far too sudden. She confessed her deepest worry who would take care of Lin. Zhang immediately panicked, desperately urging her sister to say yes. Hearing her hesitation again, Sun's patience snapped. He stood up, scolding her for being so ungrateful after he'd rented an entire hotel and promised to care for her daughter. Zhang chimed in, pressuring her sister to accept the wealthy and powerful man's offer. But something inside Shin snapped. How dare he speak to her this way, with newfound resolve? She flatly refused his proposal, his rage boiling over. Sun seized her arm. Shin tried to pull away, but he leaned in and threatened her. If she didn't obey, her entire family would disappear. He hissed that for her daughter's safety. She had better be obedient. Then, he arrogantly announced to everyone that today was their wedding day. The guests erupted in cheers, praising his overwhelming power. Lin had seen enough. From the shadows, he told Chin she knew what to do. In a flash, she was standing right behind Sun. As Sun advanced on Shin, Chin caught his hand, forcing him to turn. Her eyes blazed with fury as she ordered him to halt. His guards rushed forward, but Sun, with a confident smirk, waved them away. He ordered everyone else to leave the room. The arrogant man completely misread the situation. He thought Chin was acting out of jealousy, envious of his new fiancée. With a smug smirk, he caressed her cheek and asked if she wanted a hug too. The remaining guards laughed at his talent, but Chin had reached her limit. In a blur of motion, her hand met his face with a resounding crack. The force was so immense, his glasses shattered instantly. Sun stood there, completely stunned, his hand covering his cheek in disbelief. Then his shock turned to absolute rage. He screamed at his guards to finish her. The guards charged, yelling that she had just signed her own death warrant. But their confidence evaporated in an instant. Chin calmly raised a hand, and with a mere flick of her wrist, sent the first man flying, without even breaking a sweat. She neutralized 3 more guards. They crumpled to the floor in a heap. The last guards stared at their fallen comrades, completely baffled. Sun, beyond furious now, roared that he was the family heir, and this was his territory. Chin looked at him with pure disdain. She stated coldly that sons of powerful families should learn some humility. Just then, a woman in the crowd murmured aloud. Just who was this mysterious girl? With a calm that unnerved everyone, Chin wished the woman a happy birthday, leaving her utterly speechless. Suddenly, a breathtaking melody swept through the entire hotel, and a voice boomed. "Everyone, look at the stage!" The sisters whipped their heads around, their eyes widening in shock at the sight of a handsome man playing a magnificent tune on the piano. Zhang was completely captivated, shouting about how gorgeous he was. But Chin knew him instantly. That was her husband. She whispered to herself that the man on stage was indeed her master. Her sister overheard, utterly confused by the strange title. Sun's face twisted with rage. How dare someone else make a scene in the hotel his family practically owned? "Manager!" he roared. The hotel staff scrambled to his side as the manager ordered security to handle the intruder. Moments later, a swarm of hotel guards appeared. A wicked grin spread across Sun's face. Finally, Chin would pay for slapping him. He pointed a trembling finger at her and commanded, "Throw that woman out." But the guards didn't move toward her. They turned on him. To his absolute horror, they seized him and started dragging him away. "Let me go," he shrieked. "I am Sun." The hotel employee offered a chilling smile. "There's no mistake," he explained. "The entire hotel has been booked by a Mr. Lin." For a moment, Sun tried to cling to his arrogance, but as the crushing reality set in, pure panic took over. The manager bowed deeply to Shinn, apologizing for the disturbance before ordering his men to eject Sun and his cronies from the premises. Over the radio, the manager's voice echoed with a final verdict. The entire Sun family was now permanently banned from the hotel. With the drama over, all eyes returned to the man at the piano. Shinn couldn't look away, a hurricane of emotions swirling inside her. Could that truly be him? Could it be her husband? Janang, mesmerized by the rich, handsome stranger her sister knew, begged for an introduction. But Shinn, still guarding her secret, simply replied, "I don't know him." The guests were lost in the unique melody pouring from Lin's fingertips. Suddenly, the sound of explosions from outside shattered the calm. Someone yelled for everyone to look up at the sky. As they did, a collective gasp filled the hall. The night was set ablaze by a spectacular fireworks show. And there, written in fire, was a message congratulating the birthday girl. Shinn stood frozen, completely overwhelmed by the breathtakingly romantic display. Hearing Lin's name spoken with such awe and admiration stirred something deep within her. An undeniable urge took hold. She had to see for herself. She had to confirm if the man at the piano was the one she thought he was. Shinn spun around and bolted towards the stage, but her younger sister grabbed her arm, trying to hold her back. She ripped her hand away and sprinted forward, certain that Lin was waiting for her. But when she arrived, the room was silent. The piano was empty. Her heart plummeted. Why would he leave from behind her? Her sister's calm voice cut through the silence. "Lin already went home." Hearing those words, Shinn believed her. If he was home, then that's where she needed to be. In truth, Lin had already left the hotel and was waiting in their room long before his wife even arrived. "Gather all information on the Jan family and bring it to me," he commanded. She bowed, apologizing for her boldness, but stated that his awakening must remain a secret. "I can handle this matter personally," she declared with resolve. The protagonist smiled. "Are you truly worried about what will happen if they learn I've woken up?" Standing by the window, Shinn refused to answer. Suddenly, she spotted Shinn approaching the house. She bowed once more. "Goodbye, master. I will carry out your orders." Lin changed back into his shabby old clothes, resolved to conceal his recovery just a little longer. He hated keeping this from his wife, but it was a necessary burden. As Shinn walked in, she completely ignored her mother's questions about the party. From behind her, the woman shrieked that nothing had changed and that worthless man was still in there. Jang followed, a smug look on her face. "Mother, Shinn was a huge success tonight." She played a video of the mysterious man who rented the entire hotel, proudly announcing that the tycoon named Lin had done it all for Shinn. Their mother scoffed. So, now that Shinn has found someone richer, she doesn't need to marry Sun anymore. But Shinn paid her no mind and pushed open the door to her room. With tears welling in her eyes, she whispered, "Lin," hoping for a miracle. Her heart shattered as she saw him sitting there, motionless in his wheelchair. She was so sure, so certain she had seen him at the hotel. Now, all of her hope crumbled into dust. Sobbing, she recalled how 5 years ago, her family tried to force her to marry Sun, a man she utterly despised. She was saved when her grandfather introduced her to the protagonist instead. They married that very night, and soon their daughter, Ray, was born a small light in their dark world. But then, a cruel fate struck. Ray fell gravely ill, desperately needing a bone marrow transplant. Lin had become her hero, saving their daughter by sacrificing his own health. Tears streamed down Shinn's face as the weight of it all came crashing down on her. Her daughter was safe, but her husband was a shattered shell of the man he once was. Kneeling before him, she pleaded for his return, confessing she couldn't bear this living nightmare any longer. Lin gazed at his wife, his very soul aching with unspeakable pain. In the silence, he made her a solemn vow her suffering would end, and soon. Meanwhile, Jang watched with icy disdain, wondering what her sister saw in this useless vegetable. Then, a wicked idea sparked in her mind. Recalling a certain wealthy man named Lin, a cruel smirk played on her lips as she entered, weaving a web of deceit to lure Shinn to a bar. Shinn refused. Her duty as a mother calling, Ray had school tomorrow. But Jang was relentless, insisting they both deserved a night to relax. This was all part of a larger scheme. Earlier, Sun had called Jang, demanding she uphold her end of their sinister bargain. At first, she had hesitated, but he dangled the ultimate prize before her, the chance to make the mysterious Mr. Lin her husband? Swallowing his lie, Jang agreed to deliver her sister to the bar that very night. And so she hugged Shinn, her words dripping with false praise, all while her treacherous plan moved silently forward. Worn down, Shinn finally gave in, unaware of the trap being set. As she left, Jang shot a venomous smile toward the protagonist. She leaned in close, whispering a cruel promise. After tonight, your wife will finally be free. And with that, she was gone. The hero was left in suffocating silence until a shadow emerged from the window. It was Chin. Her report was grim. She had uncovered the latest schemes of the Jang family. His wife's very own blood. Chin explained that their company was facing a financial crisis, and the Sun family had offered a lifeline. In exchange for marrying their son, Lin's expression hardened. That man was a calculating snake. Let's see, he declared coldly, if his schemes are faster than my blade. Just then, the hero saw his wife's car pulling away. He gave the order instantly. Track her every move. Meanwhile, at a luxurious bar, Sun was radiating with triumph. The staff, noticing his glee, asked if he had some good news. He let out a booming, arrogant laugh. The best news, he declared, as those around him offered their empty congratulations. At that moment, the Jang sisters walked in. Shin, completely oblivious, asked if they were in the right place. Every man's head turned, captivated by their beauty. A predatory smile spread across Sun's face as he approached his prey. Shin's pleasant expression vanished. She wasn't here to see him, and she demanded to know why he was present. Her younger sister, Jang, desperately played the mediator, trying to smooth over the sudden tension. Then, the horrifying truth dawned on Shin. Her own sister had conspired to lure her here. Sun put on a show of remorse, bowing deeply and begging for a chance to talk. The hero's wife knew deep down. Her family's survival depended on Sun's support. She couldn't afford to burn this bridge. He, in turn, promised his behavior would change. But behind his apologetic eyes, a vile thought echoed he was just waiting for the perfect moment to drag her into his bed. He moved to the counter. As he poured the wine, he saw his chance. While her attention was diverted, a small pill dropped silently into the glass. Returning, Sun offered her the doctored wine, a token of his sincere apology. But Shin refused. She was driving and couldn't drink. That's when her sister, her own blood, insisted she take a sip to prove she'd forgiven him. Jang grabbed her arm, saying a little wouldn't hurt. Cornered. Shin finally took the glass and drained it in a single gulp. Jang smiled triumphantly, her betrayal now complete. Sun could barely contain his glee. He could already taste his victory. A few moments later, a wave of dizziness washed over Shin. She tried to tell her sister they had to leave, but Sun pushed Jang aside. Taking her place, before she could protest, he swept her into his arms. Shin struggled, her strength failing her. The bar was full of people, but they all just watched, smiling. Her sister saw everything and did nothing. At that exact moment, the report came in to Lin. She has been taken. Rage exploded within Lin. He commanded his subordinate to find her location, immediately. The answer came back in an instant. The Grand Milky Way Hotel. The hero's fury was absolute. He ordered Chin to scout the area, but the main problem? He would handle that personally. As Sun dragged his wife to a nearby hotel, Shin's mind was a fog. She didn't understand where she was, or what this monster planned to do to her. She pleaded to go home, but Sun just sneered, telling her she was just drunk, and knew exactly why they were there. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. Tonight, he hissed, you're sleeping with me. But she would not surrender so easily. With a final surge of strength, she shoved him away. A twisted grin spread across Sun's face. He sneered, surprised his prey still had the will to fight. Vile words dripped from his lips like poison. He seized the girl's hand, his voice a mocking hiss. You can't escape. My men are everywhere. Revulsion twisted in the protagonist's wife's stomach as she struggled against his disgusting grip. She knew she had to fight back with everything she had. Seizing the opportunity, she sank her teeth into his ear. His amusement vanished, replaced by pure rage. He yanked her back by the hair, roaring. If you continue this, you'll beg for death. His hands wrapped around her throat. This is your fault, he spat, for refusing to marry me. In that dark moment, Chin could only think of her husband. Suddenly, a chilling silhouette appeared in the doorway. Sun didn't recognize the man and barked, Get out! You're in the wrong room. The hero's aura alone was suffocating. His voice was ice as he promised. Touch her again, and I will send your entire family to the cemetery. Chin's eyes widened in disbelief. Could it truly be him? Her husband was here. Before Sun could even process the threat, Lin's fist crashed into his face, sending him flying to the ground. Sun stared up at the unexpected guest, his mind reeling. How did a man in a wheelchair get here powerless on the floor? He could only admit defeat. A fresh bruise was already blooming around his eye, a perfect match for the raw scrape on his cheek. He was certain they were conspiring against him. The sheer absurdity of the claim only fueled the protagonist's anger. Sun staggered to his feet, his legs trembling. He boasted that his backup would be arriving any second now. A foolish sense of superiority returned to him. He began to sneer that a nobody could never deal with someone of his status. The man resorted to threats, snarling at Lin. "Harm me, and I'll make your wife and daughter suffer beyond imagination." That was the final straw. "What utter nonsense are you spewing?" Lin decided that for now, he would limit himself to just a warning. Just then, Sun pulled out his phone, smirking. He vowed that he would soon show everyone who the true nobody really was. In an instant, Lin's hand shot out, intercepting his wrist. "Is this the hand?" Lin asked, his voice deathly calm. "That you used to touch Chin." Lin began to twist the man's arm. A scream of terrible pain tore from his lips as he shrieked that his family would not let this go. In response, the protagonist delivered another crushing blow. As the man collapsed to his knees, Lin stated coldly, "I don't care about your influential family." The protagonist then turned his back. He promised that if the coward ever caused trouble again, there would be no mercy. In that moment, Chin felt her eyelids growing heavy. It was becoming impossible to remain conscious. Her husband rushed to her side, draping his jacket over her. "I'm here now," Lin whispered. "Everything is going to be fine." But his words couldn't completely calm her terror. She reminded him, "You'll go to prison for murder." Hearing the girl's words, Sun's confidence surged back. He began to taunt Lin with a smug grin. The protagonist approached him once more. "In my eyes," he declared, "you are not even a person." He then shoved him back to the ground. Sun began to beg for mercy, but the hero simply replied, "I won't destroy you yet. You still have your uses." After that, Lin removed his foot from the man. His entire body trembled as he asked what Lin wanted. The hero stared down at the insect who dared to bring his wife to a hotel room against her will. A cold smile formed on his lips. "Now," he said, "I'm going to teach you a proper lesson." The man tried to convince Lin to back down, but the protagonist's foot stomped on his most vulnerable point, causing him to scream in pure agony. With that, his duty felt fulfilled. He could leave Sun writhing on the ground in misery. He then took his wife into his arms as she regained consciousness. The girl looked at Lin, her heart overflowing with joy that he had saved her. Chin was terrified that this was all just a dream, but her husband promised. "This is real. I'm sorry I was late." He leaned in and gently kissed the girl. Then, speaking to Chin, he said he would take her home to be examined by a doctor. A happy smile finally graced Chin's face. In just 2 years, the world had forgotten about the legendary Supreme Lin after the accident. But now, he had recovered. He would announce his comeback by utterly destroying the Sun family. Sometime later, Lin entered a room and saw his daughter was still sleeping. He sat on the mattress, and the girl felt a man's gentle hands. She then woke up. Suddenly, Rui saw her father and hugged him, crying tears of relief. She admitted she was terrified of not seeing him again. The girl worried about his health, but he convinced her he was just tired and it was time to sleep. He promised her that her mother would be back a little later. The man was about to go to the bedroom when a small hand grabbed his. Rui looked upset, tormented by a single question. "Will you leave during the night again? You already lied to me before." The protagonist confessed to the little girl that his plans had changed. He said that under no circumstances could she tell anyone that he had woken up. Rui promised she wouldn't even tell her mother. And so, father and daughter swore to keep their precious secret. Elsewhere, a physician studied the grim results of a patient's exams. She entered the heir's room, her expression grave, stating the only way out was surgery, a procedure with a life threat. The young heir felt the chilling certainty that his days were numbered. Then, the doctor delivered the final verdict: amputation was his only choice. A roar of pure agony echoed through the hospital, as he swore Lin would pay dearly for this humiliation. Meanwhile, Shinn was in a deep and peaceful slumber, with her daughter patiently watching over her. At that very moment, Shinn's eyes fluttered open, slowly realizing where she was. When she heard Rui's voice, her head began to spin. Her daughter giggled sweetly, calling her mother a true sleepyhead. In a flash, the haunting events of the previous night surged back into her memory, and her eyes shot toward her husband. There he sat, confined to his wheelchair, just as he always was. Tears began to stream down her face as she realized it was all a dream, that some other man had saved her. Rui gently cupped her mother's face in her tiny hands, pleading with her not to cry, promising that her father would always be there to protect them. The door suddenly burst open. Shinn's mother stormed into the room, demanding to know who dared to drug her daughter. Shinn pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, explaining that Shinn had spiked her wine, but someone had intervened just in time. The woman's face twisted in fury, ready to confront the one who violated her daughter's honor. But she froze, asking if Shinn was truly accusing Shinn. The protagonist's wife was absolutely certain. She was 100% sure of the man's guilt and confirmed her accusation. But her sister immediately jumped to his defense. insisting it was all a terrible misunderstanding. It made no sense for Shinn to do something like that, especially since Shinn was already engaged to him. The truth was, Shinn needed to protect Shinn because she was the one who took her sister to that bar, a secret that could never see the light of day. At that moment, their mother insisted that Shinn must be mistaken. Enraged, Rui shouted at her grandmother that her mother never lies. The old woman raised a threatening fist, reminding the child to remain silent while the adults were speaking. Blinding rage burned within the protagonist, but he knew he couldn't reveal his true power just yet. Just then, the woman's phone rang, and a wave of fear washed over her. It was Shinn himself, and her mind went blank. She answered the call with a trembling hand. Shinn's voice was like ice, demanding she meet him at his house, or the entire Jian family would disappear without a trace. The line went dead. Shinn's mother begged her to admit fault and apologize, to do whatever it took to save their family. The girl's heart shattered at her family's betrayal, but cornered and alone, she was forced to submit. Rui couldn't accept it. Forcing her mother to apologize to the man who attacked her was just wrong. A little later, Lin and Rui were finally alone. The little girl asked her father to please tell her mother that he was all right. The main character asked his daughter to push him to the park. He was going to fight those thugs and teach them a lesson, ensuring Grandma would never scold Mom again. This was his true objective. Rui's face lit up with pure joy, but the protagonist reminded her that this had to be their little secret. Elsewhere, Shinn's father gazed down at his son's broken form. His wife sobbed, crying that she couldn't allow this to happen to her only son. The man's voice was sharp as steel. He snapped that her tears were useless, blaming her for having spoiled their son into weakness. He declared that Shinn had become worthless trash, staining the family's reputation over a single woman. Shinn desperately tried to defend himself, insisting that he had been ambushed. His father roared, calling him an incompetent fool. His mother, however, was convinced her son was right and that the Jin family was plotting against them. The patriarch strode to the window and declared that her suspicions were completely baseless. The Jin family was insignificant, hardly a threat, even if they had some hidden backer. Nevertheless, he decided it was necessary to interrogate Shinn himself. Shinn continued to insist he was attacked by Shinn's husband. His father swore that if he ever found that man, he would personally tear off his arms and legs. Their heated discussion was suddenly cut short. The main character appeared inside their home as if from thin air. A crushing, oppressive aura instantly filled the room. He asked them what kind of trouble they'd been stirring up to require so many guard dogs. The woman hid behind her husband as he demanded to know who this Lin was and how he dared to trespass. Shinn bolted upright in his bed, shouting that this was the man, the very same Lin who had assaulted him. The father's eyes narrowed with killing intent. For this man to dare break into his home, he clearly had a death wish. The hero looked down on everyone present with utter contempt. Judging them unworthy of even hearing his wife's apology, Shinn's father raised his hand, ordering his men to seize the insolent bastard immediately. Lin, however, simply flashed a satisfied smile. He pointed out that his men seemed unable to stand, but offered to wait while he called for more. The man was absolutely livid, promising that he would not escape this place alive. He gave the protagonist one final chance to beg for his life. Lin was utterly unimpressed by such pathetic threats. Asking the man if he truly stood by his foolish words, in a blur, the protagonist vanished from his spot, reappearing instantly behind the man who dared to challenge him. A sharp crack echoed through the room as Lin's fist connected with the man's jaw, sending him crashing to the floor. The protagonist coldly explained that he operated by his own rules. Watching this unfold, the wife's face went pale with the same terror that gripped her husband. She started to scream, but the words died in her throat as she clamped a hand over her mouth the moment Lin's chilling gaze fell upon her. The man struggled to his feet, snarling that he didn't care who backed Lin. He would crush them all. Like a phantom, the protagonist materialized before him again, his voice low and dangerous. "You're just as much trash as your son." The son watched in sheer terror, his mind screaming that this opponent wasn't human. An oppressive, demonic aura poured from Lin, making his enemies tremble. He effortlessly lifted the old man by the throat, ignoring the desperate screams for mercy. The wife collapsed at Lin's feet, sobbing and promising any amount of money to make this stop. The son finally realized their company was finished without his father. He too began to grovel, pleading for his father's life and promising to never bother Shinn again. Lin let out a cold laugh. All their talk of peaceful resolutions now sounded utterly pathetic. He tossed the man aside like a broken doll. The father landed in a heap, gasping for air as his panicked wife rushed to his side. At that moment, Lin delivered his ultimatum. The family had one day to offer a sincere apology to Yins, or they would cease to exist. He added a final, chilling condition: tell anyone what they saw here, and they would vanish without a trace. Hearing those last words, a wave of absolute dread washed over the father. The office door clicked shut, leaving the family alone in their ruin, burning with humiliation. The patriarch swore he wouldn't let Lin get away with this. These feelings festered into a blinding rage. He had to find someone, anyone, to destroy the Jian family immediately. He scrambled up from the floor and frantically started making calls, while his wife nervously peered out into the hallway. But instead of giving orders, the old man was met with one piece of disastrous news after another. It was impossible. Every investor had pulled out. Every bank had frozen their credit lines. The phone slipped from his numb fingers. He couldn't comprehend how his multi-million-dollar empire could crumble in a single day. His son, wrapped in a blanket and shivering, meekly asked his father what they were supposed to do now. But the man was lost in thought, consumed by the question of who Lin was and how he wielded such terrifying power. The son was just as confused. The giants needed their money. Didn't they? Suddenly, the father ripped the blanket away, roaring that his corporations were his entire life's work. He grabbed his son, his eyes wild with desperation. "Take the money. Go and beg Shinn for forgiveness now." The son stared in disbelief, unable to process his own father forcing him to apologize. The man shook him violently, screaming that if the girl didn't forgive him, he would personally destroy his own son. Meanwhile, Shinn's mother stormed out of the house, grabbing her daughter. She ordered her to agree to every single one of the Sun family's demands, warning that otherwise, their lives would be ruined. Shinn, feeling completely drained, had no strength left to argue and simply nodded in submission. As they walked to the gate, her mother hissed at her to look more welcoming, but they stopped short. Kneeling just outside was the young master himself. Shinn's mother rushed forward, trying to help the boy up while insisting her own daughter was to blame. But the son violently threw her hands off, shouting that everything was his fault and desperately begging Shinn to forgive him. A cold suspicion crept into Shinn's mind. This had to be some kind of elaborate trap. The boy clutched the hem of her skirt, pleading for forgiveness and swearing on his life he would never approach her again. Disgusted by the display, the protagonist's wife stated that she would only forgive him on the condition that she never saw his face again. Tears of pure relief streamed down the son's face as he swore his oath. His extreme reaction stunned her, leaving her clueless as to what could have caused it. Along with the apology, the boy presented a check for $1 million as compensation for her emotional distress. Lee didn't hesitate for a second, snatching the check from his hand, while Shinn only repeated that she never wanted to see him again. The son scrambled away as fast as he could. Lee immediately grilled her daughter, demanding to know who helped her take down a family as powerful as the Sun's. But the girl had no answers. The woman pondered for a moment, concluding that their savior from the day before must be someone of unimaginable influence. The son fled from the Jin's home, clinging to the hope that his humiliation had finally fixed everything. However, his escape was cut short as he ran right into Lin and his young daughter. The protagonist fixed him with a menacing glare. The young man stammered that Shinn had accepted his apology and asked if there were any further commands. Lin simply said he hoped their paths would never cross again. The boy turned to leave, but Lin's voice suddenly stopped him in his tracks. The protagonist's warning was delivered with ice-cold precision. If he spoke a word of this, his entire family would be utterly erased. A wave of pure terror crashed over Sun. He collapsed to his knees, screaming that Lin's secret would die with him. Meanwhile, Shinn's mother was a relentless storm, insisting she divorce that loser. She preached about the sea of better men, asking why she'd cling to such a useless husband. She twisted the knife, pressuring her daughter, trying to make her feel selfish and alone. Just then, Ray returned, wheeling her father into the house, only to find her mother there. Shinn's face lit up with surprise seeing her daughter and Lin. Ray simply said she took her father out for some sun. Lin's wife immediately enveloped her daughter in a tight hug. She showered the girl with praise for being so clever. But the old woman just scoffed, unimpressed by the joyful reunion. The little girl leaned in close to her mother's ear. She whispered that her daddy had taken care of the bad uncles, adding that it was their special secret. Shinn stared at her daughter, stunned by her words. A moment later, she burst out laughing, promising to take her to school herself. A short while later, Ray was all ready for school. She peeked in on her father before leaving, just to make sure he was all right. Lin watched his family, a profound happiness washing over him. Even like this, he was a part of their lives, the moment they left. King quietly entered the room. The main character then asked the woman for a favor, to take him outside so he could watch his little girl go to school. Later, we see Ray with her mother. She confesses that she wishes her daddy could be the one to pick her up from school. Shinn promised a special reward if she was good. But as they neared the school gate, Xiao's family stood waiting, a smug wall of arrogance blocking their path. Shinn pulled her daughter close, her body tensing for a fight. She demanded to know why they were here. The man pointed a finger at a bruise on his forehead, blaming Lin for the injury. He snarled, promising they wouldn't get off so easy this time. The woman chimed in, demanding 200,000 for so-called moral damages. Then she put on a show, clutching Xiu and wailing that the child hadn't eaten in 2 days from fear. Xiao's father stood his ground, clearly not backing down. Shinn's reply was swift and sharp. Impossible! Because Lin is in a wheelchair, the man sneered, stepping closer. Believe me or not, I'll finish your ex right here. Ray bravely stepped forward, shouting that if he didn't stop, in that instant, the man felt it again, that terrifying, suffocating aura radiating from Lin. He had no desire for another beating. Without another word, he grabbed his family and fled. His wife was baffled. You promised you'd deal with that cripple. But her husband was gripped by a terrible premonition. He could only tell himself he'd get his chance another day. In the aftermath, Shinn leaned down to her daughter, gently telling her it was time to go. Suddenly, Principal Yang appeared at the gate, stating that he needed a word with Shinn. She had no idea what it could be about. Yang suggested they move to his office to discuss the matter privately. A knot of worry formed in her stomach. She feared this was about her daughter. Soon, they arrived at the office. Principal Yang then informed her that Ray's academic contract was ending this year, and they needed to discuss the plan for the next. Shinn was floored. How could this be? Their agreement was for 2 years, and it had only been 6 months. The director stammered, talking about a limited number of spots and a lack of reservations. But Shinn cut him off, reminding him of the $50,000 she'd paid when they sealed the deal. The man sank into his chair, explaining that the $50,000 was merely a down payment for admission. Fury began to boil inside Shinn. That money was for the entire first year. But the director just laughed, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He truly believed she had fallen right into his trap. Yang then began talking about how he could help secure her a spot. The first option pay him $1 million, not including his personal commission on top. He knew this option was impossible. He knew she didn't have that kind of money. With no other choice, Shinn was ready to hear the second option. Yang propped his feet up on his desk, his gaze slimy. He'd heard about her husband's condition, he said, hoping he wouldn't have to explain the details of his other method. The implication struck her like lightning. Shinn's rage erupted. She slammed her hands on the table, calling him a disgusting pig. Yang calmly adjusted his glasses, stating that on her terms, her daughter would never attend this preparatory school. But Shinn refused to be cornered by this vile man's schemes. She would simply send her daughter to a different school. The principal's face twisted with rage. He spat that no prep school in the entire city would accept her daughter without his approval. "You'll be back tomorrow," Yang screamed after her. "And you'll be begging me." Elsewhere, Ching was telling the protagonist about the school's excellent reputation and how much Shinn had sacrificed for their daughter to study there. Suddenly, something caught Lin's eye. Ching turned his wheelchair toward the school exit, and there he saw her, his wife, running away with tears streaming down her face. He sensed it instantly. Something was terribly wrong in the principal's office, and he decided to see for himself. At that exact moment, Aisha Hu's father stood before the principal, a flicker of panic crossing Yang's face. He plastered on a welcoming smile, a complete facade. In truth, the man was desperate not to ruin his ties with Ju, one of the richest men in the city. Without wasting a moment, they made their cruel demand. They wanted a little girl expelled from the school immediately. The principal knew exactly who they meant, Rui. He assured them that by the end of the semester, she would be gone for good. However, the family wasn't satisfied with waiting. Ju dangled a tempting offer, $1 million, if the girl was thrown out that very day. The principal's eyes lit up with greed. He vowed to solve the problem at once, overjoyed at the prospect of such an easy fortune. But in that very instant, the office door slammed open with a deafening crack. Every head snapped towards the entrance to find Lin. The director, oblivious to the true danger, tried to assert his authority. But the mere sight of Lin sent a wave of terror through the couple. They knew exactly who this man was. Yang, however, remained clueless to the shift in power and arrogantly demanded to know what this intruder was doing there. Another sharp slap echoed across Ju's face. His wife knew in that moment that they were utterly ruined. The director, finally growing nervous, tried to send Lin away. His attempt was futile. A cold dread seized him when Lin threatened to carve out his tongue if he dared to speak another word. With the principal silenced, our hero turned his icy gaze back to Ju and asked why the arrogant swearing had suddenly stopped. He slammed the man's hands to the floor, pinning them. He made a chilling promise if he ever dared to touch his daughter. He could say goodbye to those hands forever. Lin then shot a piercing glare towards the wife, and she understood instantly that she was also in grave danger. In an instant, the woman dropped to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Lin agreed to let them go on one condition: they had to leave town by nightfall. The director watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend Lin's overwhelming authority. The family accepted his terms and scrambled away in terror. With them gone, the main character coolly took a seat on the couch. He gave the director one chance to explain why he was targeting his daughter. Only then did the horrifying truth dawn on the director. The man in his office was Rui's father. Yet, in a moment of sheer stupidity, the director thought he could actually threaten Lin. He then made a disgusting threat. He would only let his daughter stay if his wife agreed to spend a night with him. Pure rage exploded within Lin. He shot up from the couch and kicked the man square in the face, shattering his glasses on impact. Yang crumpled to the floor, clutching his cheek, His entire body trembled with shock and disbelief. Fumbling for his phone, he screamed in a fury, swearing he would make Lin pay for this humiliation. But he never got the chance to make that call, because the office door burst open once again. The director's face lit with hope for salvation, but his boss's expression was one of pure, unrestrained anger. The school owner knew everything. He demanded to know how the principal dared to abuse his power for personal gain. The boss knew exactly what he'd said to Lin's wife. Yang couldn't believe it. He was being fired. The boss refused to be dragged down by his subordinate's filth and terminated him on the spot. He then gave Yang a final order to leave this city. The headmaster felt his world collapse, unable to understand how a man he'd dismissed as a nobody could destroy his life. The boss shoved the former headmaster forward, ordering him to apologize to the master immediately, or face a truly terrible end. The boss also apologized profusely to Lin, vowing to fix the situation. But this didn't impress our hero in the slightest. He could handle his own problems. Noticing the former director was still silent, the boss warned him plainly that he would not save him from what was coming. At that, Yang finally began to apologize frantically. Our hero leaned in, his voice laced with ice, telling Yang he was gravely mistaken to think wealth and power could control people. Because from this day forward, he would have no money and no home. The only thing he could do now was beg. The boss agreed it was a deserved punishment and promised Lin his daughter would receive the best education possible. The owner was immensely relieved. The mayor's timely call had just saved his life. Lin had accomplished his goal. He ordered everyone present to keep his appearance here a complete secret. The men promised to remain silent as the grave. But this incident made one thing clear. Someone in a high position already knew about his awakening. Meanwhile, Shinn walked through the park, feeling like all the problems in the world had fallen on her head today. Just then, her younger sister appeared beside her, asking if she was heading to the company. Shinn explained the problem, including the 1 million yuan price for the school. Her sister immediately blamed their lack of status, even mentioning her son, which sent Shinn into a cold fury. She turned away from her sister, her voice sharp and final. From this day forward, all ties with that family were officially severed. Jang mentioned hearing about her sister's mysterious man, suggesting they ask for his help, but Shinn instantly shot her down, calling it nonsense. In Jang's eyes, her sister was a fool for sticking with a nobody instead of chasing someone with real power and influence. The conversation ended abruptly as Jang stormed out, leaving her sister to face her troubles alone. Sometime later, Jang met Sun at a local cafe. Seeing his dark expression, she casually asked if he was sick. But Sun's reaction was pure fury, as if she were a threat. Jang was baffled by his sudden, explosive anger. She explained she only wanted to light a fire under him. If he truly wanted her sister, he couldn't afford to be passive. Sun let out a chilling smile. "Are you trying to send me to an early grave?" She simply reminded him of his competition, calling him the best candidate. His thank you was laced with venom, and the look in his eyes was utterly terrifying. Deciding he was a lost cause, Jang declared, "If you've already given up, then I'm done here," and turned to leave. The moment she was gone, Sun pulled out his phone, a cruel smirk on his face. He told his friends he had a fun job for them. As Jang walked down the street, she couldn't help but wonder how the proud young heir could fold so easily. She was furious, realizing her expensive new bag was just a dream now. Lost in her anger, she didn't notice two men shadowing her every move. The thugs watched their target with greedy eyes, thanking Sun for the work. They promised each other they would enjoy using Jang. Suddenly, they stepped from the shadows, blocking her path. With sickening laughs, they cornered her, asking if she was out all alone. Fear gripped Jang's heart. She had no idea what these two monsters wanted with her. Their eyes devoured her body as they sneered. "We want you." From a distance, King asked the main character if she should intervene. But he decided Jang needed to learn a lesson. Lin knew all too well that the greedy girl would do anything for money. But she was still his wife's family. He would watch a little longer, just to see if she truly needed his help. Meanwhile, the thugs dragged her into a dark alley. She begged them to let her go, promising to pay them anything. But Sun had already paid them handsomely. Hearing his name, Jang's blood ran cold. Why would the very man she tried to help betray her like this? She screamed, trying to fight back, but her terrified cries only fueled their amusement. The sound of tearing fabric echoed in the alley, broken and sobbing. Jang cried out for a savior. In that instant, Ching moved like a shadow. A single, devastating blow took down the first man. His partner fell just as quickly. Jang huddled on the ground, clutching her torn clothes. Ching looked down at her coldly and said, "Don't bother thanking me." Her command was absolute. "Stay out of your sister's affairs, because next time, I won't be here to save you." With those final words, she vanished into the night, leaving Jang trembling and alone in the alley. Through her tears, Jang's mind raced. Why did that woman call her sister ma'am? And more importantly, who was the master who sent her? Clutching herself, she was overwhelmed with guilt for pushing her sister towards Sun. Meanwhile, Ching reappeared by the protagonist's side. "Let's hope she's learned her lesson," he said. Ching agreed. She then mentioned the upcoming Benhai feast, but Lin flatly refused to go. Just then, a guard rushed to Sun's side, informing him that his 2 men had been completely neutralized. Sun's eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't understand how 2 of his men could have possibly failed, but this one failure would not stop him. He swore to himself that Jang's nightmare had only just begun. A wicked plan began to form. He called his good friend Liu. As weeks passed, the Benhai celebration drew ever closer. Sun appeared at Ching's house once more, wearing a mask of sincerity and assuring them he only had good intentions. Ching's mother fell for the act completely, happily supporting the treacherous man's words. Sun casually asked if they knew about the Benhai celebration, scheduled to take place in 2 weeks. The mother's face lit up. It was the social event of the year, and she desperately hoped he would take them. Sun claimed his family wasn't invited, so he couldn't take them himself. But he promised to introduce them to a friend who could get them in. Having heard enough of his lies, Lin's wife stood up. "I'm not interested," she said, her voice like ice. But her mother, Lee, grabbed her arm with force. "How dare you waste such a golden opportunity," she hissed. As the mother berated her daughter, Sun schemed silently. If he could convince Jang, he could use her to manipulate them both. But suddenly, Rui appeared in the doorway, with his powerful father standing right behind him. Sun froze, not expecting to see this demon again so soon. Flustered, he bowed to the girls, asking them to let him know their decision soon. Lee immediately pressured her other daughter, insisting it was Jang's responsibility to accept the invitation. But after her terrifying ordeal, Jang was no longer so quick to trust anything that came from Sun. She rushed downstairs to tell her mother what happened, but Lee's face darkened with rage, insisting the young master was incapable of such a thing. Jang didn't fight back, but a cold dread settled in her heart, a premonition that her attackers would return. Just then, Yixin arrived with a summons. Her grandfather had called, demanding her presence at the main family estate. Her mother was instantly on edge. Why would the family head suddenly summon her daughter? Sun admitted she didn't know the details. But an urgent feeling told her they needed to leave immediately. The Jang family's main estate was a world away from their modest country home, an imposing symbol of power. The grandfather sat enthroned at the head of the table. His voice was laced with displeasure as he announced the family had been snubbed, left without an invitation to the grand celebration. Her cousin pointed out that even though their business had seen some success this year, the most powerful families still looked down on them. His gaze then shifted to Sun, a predatory glint in his eye, hinting that she could be the key to gaining their attention. A wave of shock hit the young woman. She couldn't believe even this powerful branch of the family was now placing its hopes on her. For years, her grandfather had shown little interest in her life. Yet he was quick to remind her of the money he'd provided. The old man steepled his fingers, his eyes cold, and declared that it was time for her to repay the favor. She was certain her grandfather was joking. She honestly couldn't imagine what help she could possibly offer. "Or do you refuse to help the family?" her cousin sneered with disdain, accusing her of playing dumb. Sun protested. How could she solve a problem that the great head of the family himself couldn't manage? But the old man laid out his disgusting plan. An influential figure had taken an interest in her, and he could be their ticket into the celebration. A chilling anxiety crept up her spine. She tried to reason with them, saying no one would be interested in a woman who already had a child. Her cousin let out a sarcastic laugh, adding that she should be grateful for such an opportunity. Even her uncle joined their cruel game. The protagonist's wife shot up from her seat, her voice trembling with rage. "I am a married woman, not a toy for you to barter with." Her defiance meant nothing to them. Her uncle coldly retorted it was better to be a toy than to be chained to a vegetable. Shinn fought to defend her husband's honor. The grandfather slammed his hand on the table, promising that if she complied, the family's gratitude would be eternal. But the protagonist's wife refused to be sold. "I will not sacrifice my dignity," she declared. "You will not use my body for your ambitions." Shinn stood firm, stating she would honor her husband. If they wanted to proceed with this despicable plan, they could do it themselves. How could her own family ask this? But the old patriarch would not be denied. Seeing her defiance, her cousin began to press her, painting a dark picture of the consequences. Still, the protagonist's wife stood her ground, her resolve like iron. She alone had the right to decide her fate. That's when the cousin's words turned venomous, threatening that something unfortunate might happen to her husband. It was clear this woman was rotting with jealousy over Shinn's beauty, constantly muttering about what others could possibly see in her. Seizing the moment, she violently shoved Shinn against the table, before throwing her cruelly to the floor. Looming over her, the cousin shrieked that this was Shinn's final chance. Make the right choice, or the lives of her loved ones would pay the price. The pain was immense, but for her husband and daughter's safety, the protagonist's wife finally broke, agreeing to sacrifice her principles. With a dismissive wave, the grandfather made his promise. Their lives would be spared if she secured that invitation. Utterly defeated, The young woman fled the oppressive main house of the Jiang family. Sometime later, Shinn returned home and went straight to the park to find her husband. As she sat on a swing, the weight on her heart became too much. She had to tell her husband what the family had demanded. Shinn explained that a powerful man had taken an interest in her. She was being forced to entertain him, or else disaster would fall upon their small family. With tears in her eyes, she confessed that she had to get that invitation, because her family would destroy them if she failed. The heartbroken woman clung to her husband, whispering that she never wanted to betray him. But the thought of losing him and their daughter was unbearable. She apologized to Lin, believing this was the only path to protect them. An uncontrollable rage surged through the protagonist. As he heard how his wife was treated, his hands began to glow with an ominous blue fire. Gently, Lin put his sleeping wife down on a nearby chair. He then made a silent vow to hunt down every single person who dared to threaten her. In the next instant, Qing materialized beside him. She bowed deeply, awaiting his command. The time for hiding was over. The dragon had awakened. Lin ordered Qing to announce his presence to the world, starting with the Binhai celebration. Meanwhile, Yixin's mother was stunned to find her own father waiting for her at home. Just then, her cousin stepped forward, introducing a man named Liu Xiao. The man sat beside Li without an invitation and began to stroke her hair as she froze, trying to process the horrifying situation. At that moment, the grandfather insisted she summon Jin Yun. A man as influential as Liu could not be kept waiting. Lai explained their daughter was taking Ray to school, before asking why they were there. The cousins smugly reported that Liu Xiao had taken an interest in Jin Yun. As long as she behaved, the Jian family's future was set. A wave of pure joy washed over Li. The cousin sneered, reminding him this was all thanks to the grandfather's hard work. Just then, the sisters returned home. Liu Xiao's eyes shamelessly roamed over the girls' bodies, praising Xin Yun's seats. Li's joy evaporated when she saw her grandfather, the man who promised to leave them alone. He introduced Liu, declaring he was the one Xin Yun would be accompanying. The man cleared his throat, a sly smile on his face, saying he was looking forward to their meeting. Li cornered her eldest daughter, hissing that she could not dare waste this golden opportunity. The grandfather's face darkened at his granddaughter's disrespectful silence, but Liu simply chuckled, saying a little shyness was normal for a first date. The man decided to introduce himself, boasting about his company, but Xin Yun turned and walked away with pure disdain. The old man fought back the urge to put Xin Yun in her place. Liu's smile faded as he coldly asked if the family was not welcoming him. Cousin Yan slapped Xin Yun across the face, screaming at her for daring to behave so arrogantly. The girl loomed over the main character's wife, demanding she immediately apologize to Liu. Just then, Liu smoothly interrupted them, mentioning how difficult it was to get tickets these days. Xin Yun sat on the couch, holding her cheek. As the threat hung in the air, her attitude could cost them their invitation. The cousin clung to Liu's arm, assuring him her grandfather would take care of everything. Suddenly, a predatory grin spread across Liu's face as he added that he would need one more person. Without hesitation, Li declared that Jian would also go with him. Horror filled Jian's eyes. But the grandfather simply lit a cigarette and told the man he could take both sisters. Li screamed at Jian for refusing, explaining that Xin Yun would protect her from any trouble. Liu wrapped an arm around the confused girl, pulling her in as he ordered both sisters to leave with him. In his twisted mind, one night of their company was more than a fair trade for the reward they would receive. Xin Yun refused to be part of it, but the man cruelly reminded her of her husband and daughter's safety. Liu watched with sick satisfaction as the beauty broke, her principles shattering under his threat. But watching from the shadows of the staircase, our main character saw everything. He immediately called Qing. His orders sharp and clear: cancel the Jian family's invitation and invite only Xin Yun. Outside, as the sisters were led to the gate, Liu was about to leave. But Qing appeared before him, commanding him to stop. Liu had no idea who this woman was, but Qing declared that he would not be taking them anywhere. Her voice was ice as she warned him to prepare for a tragic end. The man scoffed, assuming she was just some jealous beauty who wanted a ticket. But his smirk vanished when Qing announced his invitation was disqualified. Jian stared at the woman, wondering who she was. She always seemed to appear out of nowhere to save them. Liu couldn't believe it. A family with billions couldn't be uninvited. He decided this woman had to be a hired actress. Qing was growing tired of this conversation. At that moment, Xin Yun asked Qing not to worry, but Liu had no intention of letting them go, threatening to make Xin Yun crawl on her knees before him. Qing had heard enough. Her hand flew, the resounding slap sending him crashing to the ground as he let out a scream of pure rage. He roared that she would be destroyed for this offense, but Qing calmly threatened to cut out his tongue. Suddenly, the old grandfather stormed into the courtyard, furious that his family might miss out on the invitations. Xin Yun's mother was confused as the old man blamed her, but she replied that she had no influence over what happened. He was about to yell at her again, but was cut short by Qing's sharp voice. The woman repeated that Liu had no invitation and was disqualified from attending the event. On top of that, she announced that from the entire Jin family, only Shin Yun was invited to the Benhai celebration. A stunned silence fell over everyone, especially the grandfather, who had no idea who this master was that Qing served. King bowed her head respectfully to Shin Yun, promising that an exclusive invitation would be delivered to her shortly. The old man scoffed, refusing to believe exclusive invitations were handed out to people on the street. But right at that moment, a man appeared at the gate, announcing he had to deliver an invitation to Shin Yun. The grandfather was stunned into silence. He couldn't deny the man's authority, but how could Shin possibly be invited just then? Liu scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with recognition. Liu never dreamed he'd see this man here. He announced to everyone, that's the organizer of the Benhai celebration. Now, Liu thought, they would see he wasn't lying. But Wang merely glanced at the disgraced heir. He asked coldly, "And who are you? Why are you causing a scene here?" Liu puffed out his chest. "I am the proud heir of the Liu family." A flicker of amusement crossed the organizer's face. He stated calmly, "This year, the Liu family was not invited." The truth hit the old elder like a physical blow. The organizer himself confirmed it. The Liu family had been cast out. With a dismissive wave, Wang ordered his assistant, "Remove this trash. He is not to disturb the master." With the nuisance gone, the organizer's demeanor shifted. A respectful smile graced his lips as he held the invitation. "Which one of you is Shin?" The main character's wife felt a surge of panic. Why was this powerful man looking for her? But Wang bowed deeply, presenting an exclusive invitation. "This is from the master. Mr. Lin," he finished. "He requests your presence." Shin accepted the letter, her mind racing. "Lin, is that the man who booked the entire hotel?" The organizer confirmed with a knowing smile. "The master has always been very generous to you, milady." John's eyes gleamed with greed. If her sister married this master, their family would be set for life. She immediately asked if they could meet him. Watching from his window, the protagonist scoffed. His wife's younger sister had a very short memory indeed. Soon, Wang gently rebuffed the girl. "The lord is an incredibly busy man. He has no time to entertain guests." Jin shot the blonde a piercing glare. "You would do well not to meddle in Shin's affairs." Jian flinched, the sheer intensity in Shin's voice sending a shiver of fear down her spine. Annoyed, she muttered that her sister would never leave her husband. The organizer, his task complete, bowed low before Shin. Shin gave him a pointed look. "Your duties are finished. You may leave." The moment he left, the old man cornered his granddaughters. "Who is this master? The same one from Shin's birthday." Her cousin, Yan, snatched the invitation away. She sneered. "What tricks did you use to snag a man like that?" In Yan's eyes, only she deserved such an honor. But Shin stood her ground. She had to know. Was this mysterious master true? The grandfather exploded with rage. "You dare to put that useless husband and your daughter above this family." He demanded she abandon the protagonist and secure their family's fortune instead. To him, Lin was nothing more than a dead weight, a burden dragging them all down. For her family's sake, Shin relented, allowing the invitation to be taken. Yan smirked victoriously. Shin was never worthy of it anyway. All this time, the protagonist and king watched the disgusting scene unfold. Lin's servant burned to teach them a lesson in humility, but the hero stopped him. "One day," he promised, his voice dangerously low, "I will make them regret ever being born." Just then, King's phone buzzed. It was the school principal. Rui had been rushed to the hospital. The news struck Lin like a thunderbolt. His daughter had collapsed. "Chin, start the car, go!" Minutes later, they screeched to a halt at Benhai Central Hospital. They found Rui, pale and unconscious. The doctor was grimly studying her test results. Chin and Lin burst into the room asking, "Doctor, how is she?" The doctor looked up, his expression grave. "It's a relapse of her old illness." Lin sank onto the bed. "Can we do another bone marrow transplant?" But the doctor had another idea. "First, we need to consult Dr. Lee. We must have him see Rui." The protagonist was very surprised. "Dr. Lee was in this city?" The doctor explained. "He returned the moment he heard rumors of the master's awakening. He is in this very hospital." Lin wasted no time. He ordered his servant to find the doctor immediately. "Bring him to me, now." As his servant left, the doctor turned to the protagonist. "Do you understand the true nature of Rui's illness?" Lin replied. "I was gravely injured back." The doctor revealed the shocking truth. 2 years ago, Rui awakened both the imperial and royal bloodlines simultaneously. That's what caused her coma. Fear gripped the protagonist's heart. He couldn't believe his ears. But just then, a new voice spoke, as Dr. Lee entered the room. "Great one, do not worry. I have come to aid the young princess." Seeing Lin again, the old man's eyes filled with tears of joy. This emotional reaction made the other men in the room shift uncomfortably, and they exchanged silent, awkward glances. The god of war brushed it aside, his focus returning to the critical issue, the dangerous fusion of bloodlines within his daughter. It's unheard of for the royal and imperial bloodlines to exist in one person. "But doctor," Lee corrected him, "in all the world, there are only 3 known individuals who possess both." He knew of 2 bearers of the imperial bloodline, one of them residing in the capital, but a third that was a name lost to the shadows. Dr. Lee let the silence hang in the air, then shattered it with a single, shocking name. The third bearer was Rui. In that instant, the doctor's powerful aura flared to life. The main character's eyes narrowed at the threat, and he commanded, "Ching!" In a blur, Ching was already behind the old man, his hand hovering just inches from his throat. "Explain yourself," he warned coldly, "before you dare lay a hand on her." Dr. Lee was unfazed. "Lord Lin's imperial bloodline was sealed away years ago," he stated. "It should never have awakened in your daughter." He then posed a chilling question. "Does the god of war wish to know the reason why?" Lin was caught off guard, uncertain how the imperial bloodline could have manifested. He signaled for Ching to release the doctor. The old man swore an oath. If the girl remained by his side, her connection to the imperial bloodline would forever remain a secret. This was the answer Lin had been waiting for. For now, he would place his trust in Dr. Lee. But another thought struck him. The school would have called Shinn. She was on her way. Realizing his time was up, the protagonist turned to leave. He trusted Lee to handle the explanations for Yinshin. Moments later, the protagonist's wife raced down the hospital halls, her heart pounding with fear. She was so consumed by panic, she barely noticed Sun. He called out, wondering what she was doing there, but his friend shot him a glare, wanting no part in any trouble. Sun took a light smack to the back of the head from his friend, but insisted he had nothing to do with this crisis. He correctly guessed her frantic state was all because of her child. Liu questioned why they even cared, but Sun had a cunning plan. He knew Shinn would be desperate for money to cover the treatment. Knowing the Jan family was destitute, Leo saw his golden opportunity. He would make the beautiful blonde beg him for help. Just then, Yixin burst into the room, her eyes wild with worry. "What happened to my daughter?" she cried. Lee immediately motioned for quiet, not wanting to disturb the little princess. Shinn was stunned to see another doctor besides Shinn, and demanded to know who he was. Chen introduced his esteemed mentor, assuring her that Rui was out of danger. With a snap of his fingers, Rui stirred in her sleep. Dr. Lee explained that thanks to his acupuncture, the girl would awaken very soon. Suddenly, Rui's eyes fluttered open, searching the room for her father. She was certain she'd heard his voice. Her mother rushed to her side, explaining she had fainted at school. She told her they were incredibly lucky to find a doctor who practiced traditional Chinese medicine. Rui immediately recognized the man as a legendary doctor. The old man was overwhelmed with emotion, touched by the sweet child's kindness, overcome with affection. The man leaned down and wrapped the little girl in a gentle hug. A wave of anxiety washed over Shinn. How could she possibly afford this doctor's fee? Her family wouldn't help her with a single coin. Sensing her distress, the man smiled gently. "There will be no charge," he explained. "I am here on behalf of a Mr. Lin." At those words, Rui's eyes widened. Shinn desperately asked for more information. Who was this Mr. Lin? Why did he keep helping her bound by secrecy? Lee could only reveal that Lin was the supreme lord of the southern border. The full truth would be revealed when the time was right. The doctor gently laid the girl back down in her bed. He then handed her mother his business card, instructing her to call if anything changed now that Rui was awake. Convinced the girl was stable, he bid them farewell and departed from the infirmary. Rui immediately turned to her mother. "It was father," she whispered. "He invited Dr. Lee. I heard his voice in my dream." While Shinn usually dismissed such talk, a spark of hope ignited within her. What if the great Lord Lin truly was her husband? It would explain so much about the mysterious man she married. But one question continued to plague her thoughts. If her husband had truly awakened from his coma, why hadn't he told her directly? Rui could see the troubled thoughts swirling in her mother's eyes, but Shinn quickly brushed them aside with a forced smile. She gave her daughter a reassuring wink and announced it was time to go home. But suddenly, Dr. Chen stepped in. "The little princess must stay," he insisted. "She needs to be kept under observation for a few more days." Shinn's heart sank at the thought of leaving Rui alone, but her daughter's face lit up. She promised her mother she would be fine and that she should enjoy the time to herself. And so, the girl remained in the hospital, patiently waiting for her full recovery. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still at the hospital, demanding a report. "What have you found on the head of the Jin family?" he asked his subordinate. King had been swift, and in that short time had already uncovered something strange. She reported that while the family was ordinary, there was something different about Shinn's father. The protagonist remembered meeting his wife's father only once, just before the old man's sudden passing. His subordinate confirmed it, adding that whispers and rumors suggested he was never the true heir to the family. This new information intrigued Lin deeply. If what the old man said was true, then the very status of his wife's father was now in question. Lee revealed that his high standing in society had allowed him to uncover a shocking truth: the emperor once had heirs with light-colored hair. This could only mean that Shinn's father was a descendant of the emperor. But proving such a royal bloodline was another matter entirely. The old master confessed his desire to take the princess as his disciple. Lin granted him permission to teach the girl control over her abilities, and then asked what else he required. And so, Lee made his request to be allowed entry into the Bin Hai celebration. He desperately wanted to witness Lin's triumphant return. Meanwhile, Shinn had to make a heart-wrenching choice and leave her daughter at the hospital. She pleaded with the little girl to listen to Dr. Chen, promising that she would return right after work. Her mother reassured her that everything would be all right before saying a tearful goodbye. But just then, Chen's phone rang. It was her cousin.
Shinn was confused. Her cousin had already taken the invitation. What more could she possibly want?
Yan's voice on the phone was sharp, ordering her to the company immediately. Half an hour later, Shinn arrived at the office as she neared the finance department. She was met inside. Yan stood with a coffee cup in hand, her voice echoing with rage as she berated the employees, demanding to know what they were doing.
Shinn dreaded seeing her cousin, but she had to know why she'd been summoned so urgently.
Yan turned her glare on Shinn, sneering at her for asking such a foolish question. "You're the financial manager," Yan spat, "and you dare to be absent while the company is in a crisis." In a flash of anger, she hurled the hot coffee at Shinn, but the woman moved swiftly, dodging the attack as she remembered she had officially requested the day off. Yan didn't care. She promised to dock half a month's salary, warning that next time she wouldn't miss.
Shinn's protests were useless. Her cousin was convinced the company's crisis was because of lazy employees just like her.
The blonde woman refused to take the blame, reminding her that every single account has to go through Yan first. Realizing the implied accusation, her cousin cornered her with an impossible ultimatum: fix the company's crisis in 3 days, or be fired. The deadline was beyond ridiculous. Shinn thought Yan must be joking, but the cold look in her eyes said otherwise. Her cousin repeated the threat, vowing to fire her if she failed.
A smug smile spread across Yan's face. She was certain that Shinn would never be able to pull it off.
Elsewhere, Sun sat comfortably in his office. Like Lu Yu, he was growing tired of waiting. But he assured his friend that Yan had promised no more problems with Shinn this time. Lu was eager, already fantasizing about how he would finally gain the upper hand over that woman. Sun grinned with absolute confidence, certain of their success. But his friend couldn't shake his unease. Remembering how all their previous plans had failed, Sun simply replied that he had a plan B. Should the first plan go wrong? Sun's mere questioning of Yan's word was enough to make her nervous. She quickly promised she wouldn't tell a soul. Yan gave a playful wink, and the men couldn't help but think that the Jin family's genetics had been cruelly unfair to her. Lu demanded to know his friend's backup plan. He needed to be prepared for any outcome. Sun explained that in Shinn's world, there are only 2 people who truly matter: her precious daughter, Rui, and her husband, Lin. At that very moment, the main character entered his daughter's room. He asked if she would accept Dr. Li as her master. Rui's eyes lit up, asking if the man would teach her how to heal people. The god of war gazed at his daughter with pure adoration. He was about to explain everything Li would teach her, but was cut short when Qing appeared, bearing grave news about Shinn's troubles at the company. The Jian family was plotting to confiscate their house to cover the company's losses. Lin's voice turned to ice as he asked if someone was pulling the strings. His subordinate confirmed their suspicions. Multiple witnesses saw Lu and Sun in the finance department.
Rui grew fearful for her mother, but her father gently calmed her, promising he would handle everything. Her only job was to get better.
Qing awaited her master's command, asking if she should bring the 2 men to him. The protagonist decided to let them squirm for now. They would be dealt with in due time. First, he had to take care of Shinn, his wife. Meanwhile, sat trapped in her office for hours, unable to find a... It was a total catastrophe. All the company's partners had withdrawn their investments. Even the banks had refused to grant them a loan. Panic began to set in. The girl was overwhelmed with worry. She only had 1 day left to solve an impossible problem. Her desperate thoughts were shattered by a loud sound. Someone had just barged into her office without even knocking. It was Sun. He was moving forward with his plan, approaching her at her most vulnerable moment. The man acted casual, telling her he had come as a noble hero to help her. Shinn rose from her desk, her eyes cold. She had no intention of accepting anything from him. She ordered him to leave. The man only pressed harder, reminding her that her family was about to be homeless. But even that didn't break her resolve. The guy feigned generosity, claiming he always helps others. He then turned to leave, saying he wouldn't bother her anymore. But just as he reached the door, he delivered his final venomous offer. "If you want my help, come to the hotel by 9 in the morning." Shinn's fury erupted. She declared she would never make a deal with such a dishonorable person. The boy didn't even flinch. He simply said he would await her at the appointed place tomorrow. Shinn's wife realized this entire situation was a trap set by her own relatives. At that moment, Shinn's mother was frantically sorting through a pile of documents. She demanded to know why company property had been delivered to their house. With no other choice, her daughter confessed that Yan was threatening to confiscate their home. The woman exploded with rage. Problems were crashing down on her family relentlessly, but she was certain her daughter could just ask that man, Lin, for help, solving everything instantly. But the main character's wife replied that she had never even laid eyes on this man. Her mother immediately began to blame her for all the family's troubles. Shin couldn't bear the thought of disappointing her loved ones. And since the Wang family had ignored her pleas, the girl was forced to seek help from Sun. The day of the meeting finally came. As the scheduled time approached, the main character's wife located the hotel and found the designated room. She strode inside, calling out for Sun. But the man standing by the window was a complete stranger. The girl had been staring at the floor, lost in worry, and hadn't noticed. Suddenly, Wang turned from the window and offered a kind greeting. The sight of Wang sent a chill down her spine. He was colluding with the Sun family to bring about their ruin. The man approached the blonde calmly, explaining that it was all a misunderstanding. He said he was just short on time and presented her a check. Wang added that Mr. Lin would resolve everything, even altering the Sun family's card number with a clever trick. That was the only reason he was present in this room. Shin was overjoyed, offering her sincere gratitude to the person who had saved her. Wang then exited the room, leaving the girl behind. The moment the door closed, his expression turned to ice. He met with the main character, reporting that his wife's problem had been solved. Now, Lin was moving to punish the offender. Meanwhile, Lu sat in another room, seething with anger that Ixin had not yet appeared. He had to admit, the girl was difficult to break. Just then, his phone rang with Yan on the screen, boasting that he could kidnap anyone. A sudden knock came from the door. Thinking it was Shin, he eagerly ran to open it. However, standing in the doorway was a completely different woman than he expected. It was Ching. She delivered a brutal kick to his face. Lu was sent flying back, crashing into a table and shattering the dishes. Blood gushed from the man's split lip. Lu couldn't comprehend why this strange woman kept appearing and tormenting him. Ching gave no reply. Instead, the main character stepped into view, and Lu was shocked by his familiar appearance. The main character introduced himself as a soldier who served for many years, becoming known as the supreme leader of the South. Lu's body began to tremble with fear. He wondered why a powerful man like this would ever help Shin. Lin revealed that she was his wife and shoved the man to the ground. Lu couldn't believe a disabled man could be the leader of the South. In that instant, the main character unleashed a powerful aura. He coldly stated that it didn't matter if the man believed him. The man leaned down, grabbing Lu by his shirt collar and lifting him effortlessly into the air. Lin believed the only thing that mattered now was making this insect pay for what he had done. Humilio couldn't believe the main character would dare to harm him. He was one of the wealthiest heirs in the country. But the man was gravely mistaken. He was slammed against the wall with tremendous force. He was severely injured, and all his doubts about the main character's power vanished. He immediately began begging for forgiveness, promising to pay any sum of money. Lin looked down at him and asked if he truly looked like someone who needed money. Ching watched with a satisfied smile as her master taught him the consequences of his actions. Lu's arm was broken and his entire body ached, but the main character stopped, saying this was only a warning. Lin wanted the beaten man to understand that the next time, there would be no forgiveness. As he was about to leave, the hero gave one last order: never speak a word about his identity. Afterward, as they walked down the hotel corridor, Ching asked if Lin feared what might happen. The main character promised that if Lu's family dared to try anything, they would all be ruthlessly annihilated. Suddenly, the woman's phone rang, and she paused the conversation. Ching's face went pale with terror when Dr. Chen reported the little princess had been kidnapped. Her whereabouts unknown, Lin was also devastated by this news. They raced to the hospital, determined to shield Shin from the horrible truth. They arrived at the infirmary in record time. Dr. Chen was there. The god of war demanded to know when his daughter had disappeared. Chen explained he brought her breakfast and left to prepare for physical therapy. But when he returned, Rui was already gone. Self-loathing tore through him. How could he have failed to protect his own daughter? Unbearable rage surged through his veins, and with a single, devastating strike, he shattered the infirmary floor. Witnessing this terrifying display, Dr. Chen collapsed to his knees, confessing that the blame was all his. He should have guarded the little princess with his life, but the protagonist cut him off. his voice cold as ice. He held no grudge against the doctor, who was merely performing his duties.
Chen was left stunned by this unexpected mercy. Lin then turned to Qing, his command absolute. Go to the security checkpoint. Find the culprit, now.
Meanwhile, in a cramped security room, a lone guard was completely absorbed in his mobile game. He was on the verge of victory, completely oblivious, until a sharp voice cut through the air right behind him.
Qing's sudden appearance startled the guard. She reported a missing patient and demanded the surveillance footage. But the man, annoyed, asked for more details.
The patient is a child, Qing stated coldly. She vanished roughly an hour ago. The guard scoffed, visibly irritated. Just an hour? You should check the hospital grounds first. He dismissed her, his eyes glued back to his phone. Policy dictated he wouldn't act until a full day had passed. In a flash of light, the phone was violently ripped from his grasp, leaving the guard utterly terrified. Lin had arrived, and he had no intention of wasting a single second. He would get what he wanted, one way or another. The guard, now furious, jumped to his feet. You can't just barge in here, this area is restricted, he yelled. In response, the protagonist unleashed a suffocating, murderous aura. Qing knew instantly. Blood was about to be spilled.
She quickly stepped in to de-escalate, stopping her master. She presented a small token, a crest, signifying their status as Imperial family members.
The guard's face went pale. That crest was no mere token. It was a symbol of absolute, untouchable authority.
I suggest you provide the footage immediately, Qing warned. Seeing Lin's terrifying aura recede slightly, the guard scrambled to his computer.
He frantically searched through the last hour's recordings and found it footage of Rei, sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed. The protagonist's eyes narrowed, scanning every detail. Zoom in, he commanded. On the bottom of the frame, there, a figure in a white coat emerged from the shadows, lifting the sleeping child from her bed and carrying her away. As the guard stared at the kidnapper's silhouette, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. That man. He looked familiar. Lin's sharp gaze snapped towards him. The guard stammered that the man resembled a hospital intern named Xiao Gang. Qing noted that she'd never seen him before. The guard explained that Xiao wasn't well known. He'd gotten the job through connections. Then he recalled something chilling. 2 days ago, he came to me asking about the security cameras. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, painting a grim picture. The barely contained storm of rage within Lin began to brew once more. He gave Qing a new order. Find Xiaogang, you have 5 minutes. Without a word, Qing vanished, intent on fulfilling her master's command. A crushing pressure filled the room. The guard began to tremble, terrified he had made a fatal mistake. Lin's dark energy was a tangible force, a suffocating presence. The guard didn't dare breathe, let alone interfere. As the main character took a seat, the guard wondered, are all members of the Imperial family this terrifying? Qing was brutally efficient. Within moments, Xiao Gang was dragged into the security office. She threw the intern at Lin's feet. My men found him skulking around the hospital, she reported. He was captured immediately. I'm a doctor, the intern protested. Of course I'm in the hospital. Lin's voice was dangerously low. Where did you take the child? Xiao played dumb, feigning ignorance. What child? I don't know what you're talking about. Lin's patience had vanished. He slammed his foot onto the kidnapper's shoulder. The force so immense the floor beneath them began to crack. He increased the pressure, crushing Xiao's right arm against the splintering ground. Qing and the guard could only watch the brutal interrogation unfold. The guard sweated, terrified by the raw cruelty on display. The intern couldn't endure the agony and finally broke. I was hired, he screamed. A cold smile touched Lin's lips. That single phrase was all the justification he needed to unleash his fury. Rising from his chair, Lin delivered a swift, brutal blow. It looked almost effortless, yet the impact was devastating. Xiao crumpled, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the floor. Before the intern could even gasp for air, Lin's foot was on his chest, pinning him to the ground with overwhelming force.
In a desperate gambit, Xiao tried to play unconscious, his body going limp.
Qing saw through the act instantly. Master, allow me to make him talk. But Lin shook his head. There's no more time to waste on this insect. The young doctor knew this was his only chance at survival. I'll tell you everything, he shrieked, revealing where he had taken Rui. Through shattered teeth, Xiao confessed he had placed the girl in Sun's car, and that Sun had driven her to his personal residence. Lin wasn't surprised to hear that name. But now, one thing was certain, Sun's life was officially forfeit. The kidnapper, Xiao, broke down, confessing that Sun had forced his hand.
He pleaded for mercy, but to Lin, such a heinous crime was unforgivable. Annihilation was too good for him.
The protagonist commanded Qing to dispose of the body and then follow him to the Sun family estate. Within the mansion's quiet walls, a terrified Rui was bound to a chair, screaming for her uncle to let her go. She warned him that the police were on their way, but Sun just laughed maniacally. convinced no one would dare raid an influential family's home without proof. This disgusting man then had the audacity to blame Rui's mother for his own twisted actions. He claimed this was repayment for ruining his health. Grabbing her cheeks, he sneered. But the girl shot back that her mother had never wronged anyone. Rui kept struggling, her faith in her father unwavering. She knew he would come for her. Her defiance infuriated him. At the mere mention of Lin's name, Sun struck the little girl across her forehead, spitting that Lin was the cause of all his suffering. Tears streamed down Rui's face, but then the sound of shattering glass ripped through the tense silence. Like a phantom, the protagonist materialized behind Sun. A single, brutal punch sent the villain flying, crashing straight through a wall. Her eyes met her father's, and the tears vanished instantly. Relief washed over Rui as he rushed to untie her, promising that everything would be all right now. She looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy, I knew you would come for me." An icy rage brewed within the man as he carefully checked his daughter for any injuries.
She pointed to her forehead where the bad uncle had hit her, but said the pain vanished the moment he arrived. Lin lifted her into his arms and asked, "Are you ready to teach him a lesson?"
With a brave nod, the little girl confirmed she was ready. Sun's blood ran cold as the girl told her father. "I don't remember which hand he used, but it hurt so much." Seizing the moment, Sun scrambled to escape, his mind racing. How on earth did Lin find him so quickly? The god of war listened intently to his little princess's story, and a cold, calculated fury began to form. Sun was nearing the exit, believing he would be safe in public. Surely Lin wouldn't dare strike him down in front of witnesses. But he had fatally underestimated the man known as the god of war, whose speed defied all mortal comprehension. His desperate bid for freedom had failed. Now he would face his judgment. Lin's ice-cold gaze fell upon the terrified kidnapper. "I don't recall giving you permission to leave." In that instant, the full weight of his transgression crashed down on Sun. In a pathetic act of defiance, he lunged, aiming for the very arm that held the precious child. Turning to flee, he screamed for help, crying out for his parents to save him from this demon. But there was no escape. Lin's grip on his arm was like a vice made of solid steel. With a single, fluid motion, he twisted Sun's arm, and a sickening snap echoed through the room. Rui covered her ears, complaining that the man was too noisy. The protagonist promised his daughter the bad uncle would soon be silent. In his left palm, an ethereal blue flame ignited. The azure fire engulfed Sun. His agonizing screams made the little girl squeeze her eyes shut. The light faded from Sun's eyes. His screams devolved into pathetic whimpers before he collapsed, completely silenced. Just then, the head of the Sun family burst into the room, screaming for Lin to spare his son. The father stared in utter horror at his son's condition. His chest was horribly burned, his body a canvas of bruises. The damage was catastrophic. His son's eyes had rolled back into his head. The once powerful patriarch fell to his knees, begging the god of war for mercy over a stupid mistake. But his words were meaningless. This family had shown no pity for his daughter. The head of the family knew their power and influence meant nothing here. In that moment, Ching appeared in the room like a shadow, reporting that the hospital situation was now under control. Rui flinched at the sudden appearance, but her father quickly assured her that this auntie was a friend. Lin handed Rui over to Ching's care. He had to finish this alone. Sun's father could only watch, paralyzed by absolute terror. Rui clung to Ching, telling her father to get proper revenge. Once the child was gone, the god of war could finally unleash his true power. Lin remembered a time he had shown kindness. He would not make that same mistake twice. When the patriarch tried to bargain, the god of war reminded him he was in no position to make demands. Sun was desperately trying to crawl away, his pleas now useless noise. With a single final blow, Lin ended his miserable life. The father watched helplessly as his son's life faded away. It was too late for regrets. The god of war offers no second chances. In a flash, Lin appeared before Sun's father, who was still frozen in shock and grief. He grabbed the man's head, his voice like death itself. "Your family has one day to vanish from this city, or every last one of you will be beheaded." The father understood his choice was simple bow to Lin's will and flee the city, or prepare for the next life. Back at the Lee family estate, after the chaos had settled, the patriarch stormed into the room, his face a mask of thunderous rage. He demanded to know who dared to strike his son, promising to tear the culprit limb from limb. Lee wanted to whine to his father as he always did, but a cold dread stopped him. He remembered the warning if he dared speak Lin's name. He would be utterly destroyed, and so, for the sake of his family's survival, the young master was forced to swallow his pride and stay silent. His face went blank as he muttered that he didn't know what to say. The family head, infuriated by this pathetic display, slapped his son across the face. "Remember who you are," he roared. "We own this city." Lee's mind raced. Could the Jean family truly hold more power? For now, he decided, keeping Lin's identity a secret was his only move. The father sneered at his son's weakness, but added that his story didn't matter. He had already hired an investigator. As if on cue, a man materialized from the shadows, reporting he had found a link between the attacker and the Jan family. A murderous glint appeared in the father's eyes. He was ready to obliterate the entire Jan clan that very night. Noticing the investigator hadn't left, he sensed there was more. He was right. The man spoke of Sun's murder, adding that the killer was the same person who had beaten Lee. A wave of pure terror crashed over Lee. He was convinced he would be the next to die. His father, however, only scoffed, seeing the Sun family as failures for being unable to handle a clan like the Giants, consumed by a burning desire for revenge. He began plotting how to crush the Jan family during the Benhai celebration. When the time finally came, Shinn made her way to the hospital to bring her daughter home. The protagonist's wife entered the room with a cake, a warm smile on her face as she asked how her little Rui was feeling.
But her smile froze into a mask of horror. The bed was empty. In a panic, she called her daughter's name, but only silence answered. The terrifying thought that something terrible had happened gripped.
The cake slipped from her weakened fingers, shattering on the floor. In the next second, Shinn heard her daughter's voice. Forgetting everything, she rushed to the girl, desperately asking if she was all right. Rui, not wanting to worry her mother, lied that her father had taken her out to play. Shinn immediately warned her not to wander off with strangers. But the woman grew tense when her daughter mentioned Lin was the one who took her. She believed her husband had been at home the entire time, from a distance. Jin watched the emotional reunion, noticing how Lin's wife valued their daughter's life above her own. Lin was nearby, his voice laced with anguish as he admitted that Shinn truly was a good mother. The protagonist's heart ached with guilt, whispering that he owed her an impossible debt. Lin then reminded them it was time to leave. The Benhai banquet awaited them, and they needed to prepare. The main character recalled his last battle, where he had fought to his final breath to secure peace for his family. Meanwhile, a man sat leisurely in a pool, sipping wine. He turned to his subordinate. Is it true? Have the rumors of the great Lin's awakening been confirmed? The servant affirmed the rumors, adding that word had spread of one of the great families already being exiled by him. The Dragon Lord scoffed, convinced this was nothing more than a performance to reclaim his old glory. In reality, he believed, Lin's family had long lost its power. The subordinate, however, was certain Lin posed a threat to the Emperor and suggested that he be eliminated. The man's eyes flashed with anger. Without even leaving the pool, he unleashed a wave of energy, blasting the servant backward. I don't recall, the Dragon Lord said coldly. The servant collapsed, but insisted that leaving the god of war alive was a grave danger to his majesty. But the Dragon Lord believed Lin could still be of use, given his legendary reputation among the people. However, he agreed Lin needed to be put in his place. Hearing this, the subordinate promised he would handle everything. The Dragon Lord then walked to the center of the pool, extending a hand. That looked inhuman towards a spear, but the weapon refused to obey. Red lightning began to arc violently across its entire length. The dragon god was forced to release his grip as the spear fiercely rejected his touch. The backlash of lightning left a severe wound on his hand. Suddenly, he spoke. So, my Lin is still alive. It seems a visit is in order. In that moment, eyes opened on his unusual hand, and a terrifyingly concentrated power began to gather in his palm. The Emperor decided that if he couldn't wield the divine artifact, he would simply shatter it into dust. Lightning from the god's own spear illuminated everything, accompanied by the man's echoing, insane laughter. At the same time, in Lin's home, the family was enjoying a rare, peaceful evening. But suddenly, Lin felt a strange disturbance. A look of shock crossed his face as he realized the Thunder God's spear had just been destroyed. Noticing his drastic change in expression, Qing asked, "So, what became of the spear?" Lin's voice was low. Qing reported what she knew. After the border war, the royal family seized it. But the land spear only answers to its true master. No one else could ever hope to wield it. The main character's reply was chilling. It was shattered, just moments ago. The girl's eyes widened. But the Lishan spear is a divine weapon. How could it be destroyed so easily? It was a message, he stated grimly. A warning meant for me. And I know who sent it. They won't miss the Banhai celebration. Settling back into his wheelchair, a fire lit in Lin's eyes. He made a silent vow to reclaim everything that was stolen from him. Just then, a shadow detached itself from the darkness outside. A figure cloaked in black moved silently towards the house. The figure spotted Lin's room, its target locked. With a flick of the wrist, a blade shot through the air. Glass exploded inwards as something whistled past Lin's head. Qing's senses screamed. An assassin. They were under attack. Lin ducked just in time, snatching the blade from the floor, completely unscathed. His subordinate yelled, "I'll pursue the killer immediately." Lin's gaze fell upon the weapon. A dragon god dagger. He studied it intently. Meanwhile, in the living room, Zhang and her mother flinched. A strange noise echoed through the house, putting them on edge. Suddenly, the world plunged into blackness. The lights were out. The girl scanned the darkness, her heart pounding with fear. Lin's blood ran cold. The assassin wasn't alone. Jang let out a piercing scream as a silhouette materialized from the shadows. It was standing right before her. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" she stammered. The intruder offered only a chilling silence. The masked man's cold eyes swept over them. "You will pay with your lives," he hissed, "for protecting the wrong man." A sinister purple orb of energy began to coalesce in his palm. He was preparing to strike them down. Desperate, Lee tried to reason with him. "Take all our money, just don't hurt us." The masked man sneered. "You can take your money with you. To your grave." Young clung to her trembling mother, bracing for the end. After an eternity, a new figure appeared, grasping the criminal's wrist in an iron grip. It was Lin. He condemned the coward's actions and with a slight twist, made the man wince in pain. The main character couldn't believe it. Attacking defenseless women, he may not like the Jang family, but he would protect them. Blue lightning crackled around Lin's fist. The assassin, with one hand still free, gathered his own dark energy. They lunged at the same instant fists met in a thunderous clash of power. The mercenary just laughed, ready for another round. The assassin was enjoying this. He clearly thought Lin was nothing but a weakling. The battle raged on, a knife now glinting in the assassin's hand. Suddenly, the front door clicked. The masked man grinned. "Is that your family arriving?" In that split second, the assassin vanished. When Shinn and her daughter stepped inside, the room was empty.
Shinn took one look at their terrified faces and knew something was wrong. "Did my sister come back?" Jang asked weakly.
Confused, Shinn wondered why they were sitting in the dark. She moved toward the light switch. As light flooded the room, she gasped. The aftermath of a brutal fight was everywhere. What happened here?" she stammered in horror. While her mother reeled from the shock, Jang explained, "We were attacked, but someone saved us," Young added. He looked like that Mr. Lin, from Oxen's birthday." Just then, Ray burst in, shouting, "My daddy saved our family." The grandmother looked on with pure disgust. To her, the main character was, and always would be, trash.
Elsewhere, our hero had finished his work. His attention returned to the golden dagger in his hand. Ching materialized at the window, her head bowed. "I have failed," she reported. "The assassin escaped."
"That's not important right now," Lin said, his voice calm. "Look at this dagger." Her eyes widened in recognition. "This is the dagger of the Dragon Lord, the one he bestows upon his most loyal servants. And there's more," she added. "The Binhai celebration was moved to nighttime." It confirmed his suspicions. "Go to Wang," Lin ordered. "Tell him to bring Axon here. We must ensure her safety." The main character now saw the full picture. The Binhai celebration was a trap, and he was the target. With a nod, Ching vanished into the night. Seconds later, the bedroom door flew open with a bang. His daughter rushed in, her face beaming with joy. "Daddy," she cried, absolutely certain. "You're the one who saved Auntie and Grandma." He smiled, praising her sharp mind. Lin scooped the little girl into his arms. "But what if your daddy wasn't a hero at all?" Rui just beamed up at him. "As long as you protect me and Mommy," she declared, "you'll always be my hero." Just then, Axon appeared in the doorway. "Come now, don't bother your father," she said softly. She gently took Rui from his arms. "Let's let your daddy rest for a while." Axon desperately prayed for Lin to awaken. Just then, her phone shattered the silence. It was Lord Wang, and she immediately asked what had happened. He explained the celebration had been moved up, and a car would be sent for her. But Axon's heart sank. She no longer had an invitation. However, Lord Wang simply chuckled, dismissing the invitation as a mere piece of paper. He assured her that she was a guest of honor.
A wave of relief washed over the girl as she expressed her gratitude and apologized for causing any trouble.
Later, Axon gently stroked Rui's hair, asking her to take good care of Daddy tomorrow night. The little girl beamed, promising she feared nothing when her father was by her side. A day later, the night of the Grand Binhai celebration finally arrived. The vast estate was a sea of lavish decorations. Yet, her mother couldn't understand the troubled look on Axon's face during such an important event. In truth, Axon was consumed with worry for her family, haunted by the memory of the recent attack on their home. But her mother callously dismissed her concerns, calling her family useless. She ordered Axon to focus on finding a powerful man to marry. Suddenly, their heads turned. Axon saw her grandfather arriving. With her cousin, Yan, Axon's mother seethed at her cousin's audacity. Yan spotted them, a smug smirk on her face as she asked how they got in without an invitation. Her mother shot back that they were the honored guests of Lord Wang himself, personally invited to the celebration. The man beside Yan was momentarily captivated by Axon's beauty, while Yan desperately tried to steal back the attention. She scoffed, flaunting her own invitation card, telling them to go home where they belonged. But Axon's sister-in-law stepped forward, pointing a finger at Yan. "That invitation," she declared, "belongs to my sister. Return it now." Yan sneered that only the worthy receive such an honor. Just then, her companion's eyes locked onto the invitation, and he nearly choked. It was trimmed in purple and gold, the unmistakable symbol of the imperial family. This single card seemed to confirm the rumors that the Jin family was now favored by the powerful Wang clan. In a flash, another man appeared, snatching the invitation from Yan's hand and declaring it a fake. She tried to grab it back, but he was too fast. He noted with a cold smile that her moment of glory was short-lived. Yan was furious. How dare this stranger call her invitation a forgery? Her grandfather quickly silenced her, his voice trembling, introducing the gentleman with utmost respect. A powerful man named Joe. A chill of pure anxiety washed over Yan. She instantly realized she was in the presence of someone truly influential. One of Joe's men sneered, wondering why scum like the Jin family was at such a lavish event. At the insult, Yan's fear turned back to fury, but her grandfather held her in place. The old man bowed deeply, apologizing for his granddaughter's disrespect. He promised their family was at his command. A cruel smile spread across Joe's face as he heard the head of the Jin family submit. Joe then contemptuously tore the invitation in half, blaming the Jin family for a brutal attack on his subordinate. Liu? He snarled that he had considered being merciful, but now he was forced to take drastic measures for what they had done. Yan frantically denied everything, insisting they had nothing to do with any attack on Liu. Her eyes darted towards Axon, a malicious plan forming in her mind. She grabbed Axon's arm, accusing her of harming Liu just to frame them. Axon calmly replied that it was impossible, as she had never even heard about the incident. But Joe refused to listen, ordering her to stop pretending. He delivered a chilling ultimatum: confess, or the entire CN family would be exiled from the city by morning. The tense standoff was shattered by the grand arrival of Lord Wang, and behind him stood the main character with his daughter and Shinn. Lord Wang's voice boomed that he would not tolerate such disgraceful quarrels here. Rui's face lit up. "Mommy!" she cried out. The little girl held her father's hand, waving happily and saying, "Daddy has a surprise for you." Joe stared at the newcomers with utter disdain. "And who are these insects?" he sneered. Someone replied that the cripple in the wheelchair was Axon's husband, Linfung, and the child was their daughter. Joe erupted into hysterical laughter. He couldn't believe such a pathetic loser would dare show his face at a place like this. But his mocking was cut short by a calm voice. It was Linfung. "Is there anything else you can do besides laugh?" Axon stared, her eyes wide with shock. He was really Rui rushed to her mother's side, her eyes shining, finally able to prove she was telling the truth. Joe just scoffed. So what if he was awake? A useless man in a wheelchair was still just a useless man. At that statement, the protagonist simply smirked. Then he rose to his feet, unleashing a terrifying aura that silenced the entire hall. Joe's jaw dropped in absolute disbelief. He quickly threatened to break Linfang's legs for what he did to Liu. But to everyone's astonishment, the protagonist was standing. His wife couldn't hold back her emotions any longer as tears of pure joy streamed down her face. Lin reassured her with a soft smile. "Everything is going to be fine now." But Yan suddenly lunged at him, screaming, "How dare you wake up!" The hero simply pushed her away with ease, then turned to Chin, leaving him responsible for cleaning up the mess. At his master's command, a sharp slap cracks across Yan's face. But even with a stinging cheek, her arrogance remains, daring to threaten Lin and Qing. Seizing the moment, Joe adds his own venom, spitting insults at our hero. He sneers that even with his wits back, Lin is nothing but crippled trash. The head of the Liu family nods in cold agreement. Unfazed by their taunts, Lin delivers a chilling prophecy in 5 minutes. The Liu family will be erased from Beihai City's history. He declares he will make it happen right now. His words are met with scornful laughter from Joe and the old patriarch. To them, the idea of Lin destroying their family is nothing but a foolish joke. But their laughter dies in their throats. A phone call shatters the old man's world. The company is collapsing, and investors are pulling out in a panic. To make matters worse, the banks have cut them off completely. With billions in debt, bankruptcy isn't a threat. It's an immediate reality. The Liu patriarch is frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. A cold dread grips Joe. His own family's fortune is tied to this sinking ship. With no options left, the old man swallows his pride, ready to grovel at Lin's feet for a sliver of mercy. But all he receives is a look of utter contempt. Joe, however, remains defiant, refusing to bow to someone he still sees as a nobody. In his arrogance, Joe believes he can crush Lin at will. But then, a terrifying aura erupts from the protagonist. A chilling smile plays on his lips as he asks, "Are you ready?" Instant regret flashes across Joe's face. He scrambles for a defense, desperately shouting that Lin cannot harm a royal emissary sent to the Binhai banquet. He brandishes the royal family's emblem, claiming his presence is due to Supreme Lin's failure to recover in time to attend. He claims the Supreme returned to the capital to heal. Murmurs of doubt ripple through the crowd, but Joe insists his words are true. In a flash, Lin snatches the emblem from his grasp. Joe trembles, stammering, "How dare you steal from the royal family?" But with a pulse of blue light, the hero shatters the badge to dust. He then declares that the news of Supreme Lin's retreat is a lie. The crowd gasps. To destroy the emblem is a direct challenge to the throne itself. Yan scrambles to her grandfather, urging him to disown this madman before their Jin family is dragged down with him. But Rui's voice cuts through the chaos, defending her father. She proclaims he is no coward like the Jins and needs no one to fight his battles. Enraged, Yan moves to strike the little girl for her insolence. But an invisible force wrenches her away, Lin protecting his daughter. His voice is ice as he reminds Yan. She has just insulted the Supreme's daughter.
Another sharp slap sends Shinn's cousin to the floor. She still spouts insults about him being trash, until his words finally register. Supreme Lin.
Joe's eyes widen in disbelief. Could this man truly be the Supreme of the Southern Territory? Just then, Ching returns, presenting his master's military uniform. In moments, the main character is transformed, admitting, "I am the Supreme of the Southern Territory, but you may call me Linfung." Shin stares, overwhelmed. Was the man who stood by her all this time truly him? He meets her gaze with a gentle, affirming smile. The realization crushes Yan. She threw away a man of unimaginable power. A wave of shock washes over the entire hall. They were in the presence of a living legend.
Old Man Lee suddenly appears, calling them all fools for not recognizing the decorated insignia on Lin's uniform.
The guests are stunned. It's the royal family's physician, Dr. Lee, kneels before the protagonist, pledging his undying loyalty. Lin calmly tells the doctor to rise, that such formality isn't needed. But Joe remains trapped in a state of utter denial. He shouts for all to hear, refusing to believe that Linfung and Supreme Lin could be the same person. He accuses the protagonist of hiring actors to stage this grand deception. Dr. Lee, enraged by this insult, silences him with a powerful blow to the gut. Joe crumples to the floor, gasping that an old man has no right to strike a young one. He even tries to threaten the doctor, boasting of his powerful family who will surely avenge him. But Lee simply gathers energy in his palm, declaring that he will personally see to the downfall of any so-called superiors. With a final, decisive punch, Joe is sent flying out of the hall. Lee then turns to the Supreme, awaiting his command. Lin's order is simple and cold: expel the Joe family, the Liu family, and the Jan family. After all, they were never on the guest list.
Only after the trash is taken out will the banquet truly begin.
As Yan and her grandfather face their expulsion, she shrieks that Shin should be thrown out as well, for she is also a Jian. As the old man tries to silence his granddaughter, Jang finally understands. His brother-in-law truly is the Supreme Lin.
A wave of shame washes over his mother for her past cruelty. Meanwhile, the other nobles raise their glasses, celebrating the Supreme's glorious return.
At last, they laid eyes on the living legend. Meanwhile, the disgraced Jian family was unceremoniously thrown out of the banquet. Jan whined endlessly, but his grandfather knew better. After all, they had just offended a legendary general, wheelchair or not. But one woman was convinced our hero was a fraud. She vowed to win Lin for herself. Certain Shin was unworthy of such a man.
Back in the capital, the young emperor, the infamous Lord of Dragons, received a report that shook the throne.
Zhou had been defeated by some nobody named Qin, and Lin hadn't just expelled him. He had shattered the emblem of the royal family. Fury blazed in the emperor's eyes. He saw this as a declaration of war, a betrayal to side with Lin. He commanded his subordinate to deal with this insult at once. The trembling servant stammered that he couldn't even get close to them. The Lord of Dragons roared, unleashing a violet blast that ensnared the terrified man. His voice was like thunder, decreeing that the Zhou family must be given permission to annihilate the giants, even using the #1 weapon if they had to. Barely able to breathe, the servant could only agree to the terrifying order. The emperor sneered. If Lin had remained a useless cripple, he might have been spared. But now, he would be utterly crushed. Later that evening, as the grand banquet concluded, Lin returned home with his wife and child. Shin's mother whispered to her daughter that today had been a day of incredible fortune. But little Ray noticed the sadness hidden in her mother's eyes and quietly pointed it out to her father. In Z, Lee proudly flaunted the jewels she'd received, gifts bestowed the moment nobles learned she was the Supreme's mother-in-law. Jang gasped at the glittering treasures. The two women shrieked with delight, crying out that they were finally rich.
Cutting through the commotion, Shinn's calm voice announced that she and Lin had something important to say.
But the women, lost in their greed, barely heard her. Shinn gently asked Ray to go to her room, as this was a talk for adults. She promised to come tuck her in, and Lin promised he would be right there with them. The little girl obediently went upstairs. Now, all eyes fell upon Lin, the question hanging in the air: when had he awakened? Lin explained it happened in a flash when he saw his daughter being tormented. Suddenly, a sharp slap echoed as Shinn struck him.
Through tears, she cried out, asking why he hadn't told her sooner. All their suffering could have been avoided.
Lin gently caught her hand. He confessed he'd been awake, but kept it secret, fearing she might choose that other man.
Shinn looked away, her heart aching. She confessed she had no other choice if she wanted to keep their daughter safe.
In that moment, Lin pulled her into an embrace, whispering that she and Ray were his entire world. And from this day forward, he swore no one would ever dare to harm them again.
Her heart softened, and Shinn hugged him back. Finally at peace, Lin could now focus on the battles to come.
He had to unlock his royal bloodline and find his 3 great generals, White Tiger, Redbird, and Juan. They were crucial to his grand design. The next morning, the family gathered for breakfast. Jang casually scrolled the news, asking if he was truly the Supreme Lin. His face was everywhere, hailing the return of the war god. Lin's reply was simple and cold. Believe whatever you wish. Trying to curry favor, Jang claimed she'd cared for him all this time. Lin thanked her for the supposed care, seeing right through her lies. Suddenly, the front door slammed open. Shinn's mother stormed in, an envelope clutched in her hand, with Jang smirking right behind her. The old woman accused Lin of being an imposter, of risking the entire Jian family's ruin.
Calmly, Shinn asked what this was about. Her mother threw the envelope on the table. See for yourself.
As Shinn opened it, Jang's smirk widened. She boasted that she'd investigated him and exposed him as a fraud. The letter stated that our main character came from Nilu Village in
the Kwanhai district? A complete nobody. Shinn was stunned, but her faith in her husband refused to break. Lin's gaze fell on Jang, his voice like ice. Just say what you came here to say. Shinn's cousin arrogantly announced this was a message directly from their grandfather.
From today, you are all banished from the Jan family. And Shinn, you are fired. She added that by grandfather's decree, they had to leave this house immediately. Lin turned to his daughter, his voice soft, and asked if she wanted a beautiful new home for her mother. Ray's yes was quiet, her voice trembling with a hint of fear. With her job gone, Shinn's heart was heavy with fear for their future. But her husband met her gaze, promising she had nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Lee seethed with contempt, silently cursing them both as a pair of pathetic losers. But their bitter scorn meant nothing to Lin. His world was focused on a single mission protecting his wife and daughter. He made a quick call to Ching, issuing a simple command. Come get us! We're moving to the Biksu Lake area. Hearing this, Yan exploded with mocking laughter. Biksu Lake, only millionaires live there, she sneered. Still pretending to be the Supreme. Are you? The main character calmly told his wife to follow him, and she did so without hesitation. Yan's sneer only widened. What, are you going to live on the streets now? As they prepared to leave, Lin remembered this house was their wedding gift. But he insisted on leaving the bitter memories behind. And right at that moment, Ching arrived. Jang instantly recognized the subordinate, and the pieces of the puzzle began clicking into place regarding her brother-in-law's real identity. The truth struck her like lightning. Lin, he truly was the supreme desperate to cling to that power. She grabbed her mother's arm, trying to follow them. But Lee, convinced it was all a scam, refused to move. Annoyed that no one was taking her seriously, Yan grumbled as the family departed. Some time later, the main character arrived at their new home. Ray's eyes glittered with pure excitement as she took in the magnificent estate. Lin instructed Ching to ensure his daughter's safety, and she immediately obeyed, leading the girl on a tour of their new home. Noticing Shinn's somber expression, Lin gently asked if something was on her mind. She admitted she was terrified this was all just a beautiful dream. He cupped her face, assuring her this was their reality, a chance to be a happy family once more. Even without his full strength, he vowed to protect her. His voice filled with conviction. He promised, no one will ever bully you again. Still, a shadow of doubt remained in her eyes. Wanting to make her smile, Lin suddenly declared, I bought the only village in all of Binhai City that overlooks the sea, so do you like it? Shinn finally burst into laughter, teasing him. The Supreme has such a cute side, she said. Lin replied that this side was reserved only for his family. Just then, his phone rang, shattering the peaceful moment. Lin stepped away to answer, while Shinn took their daughter inside. As he ended the call, Lin's expression turned grim. He explained it was a summons from the army. He had to leave for a while. Ray cried out for her father to come play, but Lin could only tell Shinn he'd be gone for 2 or 3 days. Fear of abandonment stung her heart, but she forced a brave smile. Go, she said. I'll take care of everything.
He kissed her forehead, promising that Ching would stay to protect them. Hours later, the main character arrived at the army headquarters, his voice echoing, "Long Tao."
The soldier rushed forward, embracing Lin warmly. "I've missed you, sir." The other soldiers stood in confusion, until Long's voice boomed across the room. "This is Supreme Lin, the highest commander of the Binhai Military Department." In an instant, every soldier in the room bowed their heads in absolute respect. Long explained he had only been keeping the commander's seat warm, and now that Lin was back, he intended to retire. Lin raised an eyebrow. "Retire? Just when you've finally become a major general." Long sighed, revealing the command post had been overrun by the royal family's influence. He was just glad Lin had returned. Finally, a breath of fresh air. But Lin knew this was only the beginning. More of the royal family's pawns were surely on their way. Noticing his grim expression, Long asked, "You really believe it's going to get worse?" The main character's gaze was sharp. "Isn't that the very reason you summoned me here?" Long admitted it was, confessing that his excitement at Lin's return had nearly made him forget the crisis. He then presented several files to the Supreme, detailing the rotation of commanders since the day Lin had been incapacitated. But the reports also held crucial intelligence about the escalating battle at the border. Lin scanned the documents. "With the military under royal control," he stated dryly, "nothing catastrophic should happen." That, Long immediately countered, is exactly the problem. These royals were accustomed to being obeyed, but they knew absolutely nothing about how to lead an army. While the southern regions remained secure, 10 cities in the northwest were being bombed, and all communications had been cut. News was being blocked, and their messengers had gone silent. Lin asked, "Is the White Tiger in the northwest? Did he lose those 10 cities?" Long confirmed his worst fears, explaining it had been 5 agonizing months since they'd last heard from the messenger. The main character opened the secret message left behind by the White Tiger. The spy's report was short and soul-crushing. "The Northwest has fallen. The royal family had made their move." He feared he couldn't survive until the Supreme Leader's awakening. His final, solemn request was that if he fell in battle, no one should mourn him. A storm of fury brewed in Lin's heart at the mere thought of losing his messenger. Long reminded him that the military answered to the Dragon Lord alone, which made the royal family's power grab all the more suspicious. Lin admitted his own doubts, revealing he'd sent an agent to investigate the capital. His conclusion was chilling. Shannon would burn the entire country just to sit on the throne. 2 days passed. The scene shifts to the Jian Company headquarters. Shinn's grandfather was lost in thought, haunted by whether firing his own granddaughter had been a grave mistake. Yan, carelessly applying her lipstick, reassured him that Lin was a fraud and Shinn was useless. But the old man's uncertainty lingered. Since her departure, their partners had abandoned them in droves, withdrawing every last cent and leaving the Jan family with nothing. Yan played innocent, claiming it would all be fine. But the old man's rage exploded, his hand slamming the table as he roared that nothing would ever be fine again. Every single one of their allies had deserted them, all to join forces with Lin. Desperate, Yan shifted the blame entirely onto her cousin, hissing that none of this would have happened if Shinn hadn't controlled the finances. Taking a shaky breath, the grandfather gave a command. "Hurry!" They were going to see the old man. This patriarch, before his death, had left behind one final gambit, a letter to be opened only in their most desperate hour. The grandfather prayed that this letter held the key to their salvation. Later that day, our protagonist returned home. He flicked on the lights, accidentally waking his wife, who'd drifted off on the couch. Shin stirred and asked softly, "You're back." Lin gently draped his coat over her, asking why she hadn't gone to bed. She replied simply, "I was waiting for you." Relief washed over her, just seeing him safe. She finally headed to their room, urging him to get some rest, too. But from the shadows of the window, Ching appeared. Lin's tone sharpened. "Report." She delivered 3 critical updates. First, since Shinn left the company, all major partners had severed their ties, causing such catastrophic losses that the company was on the brink of total collapse. Second, the Dragon Master himself was under house arrest. He remained unharmed, but his power had been stripped and given to an unknown rival. Third, she had news of the White Tiger's messenger. 5 months ago, his last known location was the northwest frontier, in a place called the Masterless Kingdom. Lin's expression turned to ice. He recognized that name. Ching added that the place now lay in complete ruins. Lin nodded grimly. That was all he needed to know. This intelligence confirmed his darkest fears. A world of internal and external chaos was fast approaching. The next morning, the hero prepared a lavish breakfast, the delicious aroma gently waking his family. Jang, still groggy with sleep, was amazed to see the beautiful spread her brother-in-law had made. Lin explained the meal was a special treat for Ray and Shin. Soon, his wife appeared, rubbing her eyes, looking completely exhausted. He pulled out a chair for her, teasing gently. You must not have slept well, staying up all night waiting for me. Shinn admitted she'd been awake thinking about finding a new job. But suddenly, Lee's voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere like a shard of glass. She declared it was time for Lin to pay them back for the 2 long years they cared for him while he was incapacitated. The mother-in-law demanded cold, hard cash as compensation, blaming him for the family's downfall ever since he awoke. Shinn immediately defended her husband, telling her mother to stop her ridiculous accusations. But the woman was relentless, continuing her verbal assault on Lin. Mortified, Shinn apologized, explaining that her mother only cared about money. The protagonist simply laughed, saying that in a way, his mother-in-law was right. He agreed that he had to secure money for their household. He then used the moment to ask about how his father-in-law passed away. Shinn told him it was a car accident, needing more. Lin looked to Jang, who claimed she didn't know the details. But she suspected Yan and the others had framed her father, all because their great-grandfather had chosen him as the rightful heir to the Jin family. The relatives were consumed with jealousy, and after he died, their family was denied even a single penny of the inheritance. Furious, little Rai shouted that they had to get her grandfather's inheritance back. Irritated, Jang snapped at her, saying a child knew nothing of such complicated matters. But Rai pulled out a necklace her grandfather had given her, saying he wanted to give it to her when the time was right. Lin took the necklace, and his eyes widened in recognition. It was made of evolutionary stones. Shinn, curious, now recalled seeing it once in her father's office. Our hero knew at a glance this was no ordinary necklace. The royal family possessed a special lineage, but to evolve their powers, they required an advancement spawn combined with a secret, forbidden method. Without warning, a brilliant blue light erupted from the necklace, snaking around Lin's hand. Drawn by its power, Ray snatched the stone from her father's grasp. But it was too late to stop her. The azure glow consumed the child whole as her parents screamed in terror. The energy surged into her core and then vanished. She collapsed, only to rise again, whispering that she felt something enter her belly. Shinn cried out in panic. What just happened? Lin explained, his face grim, that while he activated the evolution stone, it had chosen Ray of its own will. This could only mean one thing: her bloodline skill had awakened. There was no other choice now. He had to call Dr. Lee. The doctor answered instantly, his voice laced with concern, sensing that something was wrong. But before Lin could speak, the phone was ripped from his hand, hovering in midair. All around them, cutlery began to levitate, pulled by an invisible magnetic force. This was all the work of Ray's newfound, uncontrollable power. While chaos reigned in our hero's home, Jang was enjoying a peaceful moment on the beach. Her tranquility was shattered by panicked screams from the house. Lin burst outside, his daughter clutched tightly in his arms. Shinn followed close behind, shouting a desperate warning. Jang, it's dangerous. Get away. Confused, Jang could only watch them flee. Suddenly, a colossal shadow fell over the land, blotting out the sun. She looked up, and her blood ran cold. An impossible wave towered over the coast. It crashed down with apocalyptic force, slamming the girls to the ground. Run, Shinn screamed again. But Jang was paralyzed by fear, believing they were under siege from some mythical army of the sea. Wasting no time, Shinn fled, dragging anyone she could save with her. Sometime later, Dr. Lee met with our hero, his expression grave. Are you absolutely certain about sealing the royal bloodline? Lin replied that Ray's true ability was electromagnetism, a power so legendary it was spoken of only in myths. He refused to risk his daughter, so his plan had to proceed. He asked if the 10 miles of coastline were secure. Ching confirmed they were. Lin gave the order. Get ready. The group boarded their vessel and began the solemn preparations. Doctor Lee started the acupuncture, warning Lin that there were 9 prohibition levels to break, from the bottom to the top. The protagonist braced himself, ready for the agony to come. When Dr. Lee's needles struck specific meridians, he extracted something from Lin's back, tearing a scream of pure agony from his throat. Despite the blinding pain, he endured. So far, 5 seals had been shattered. Lee pressed on with the torturous procedure. The hero still had to break through 4 more layers. Tears streamed down Ray's face as she watched her father's suffering. But the harrowing ritual was not yet over. As night fell and darkness cloaked the sea, unseen eyes watched the boat from the water. This sinister figure was not alone. Drawing a hidden blade, he signaled to his team that it was time to strike. Just then, he froze, caught off guard by an unexpected arrival. Lin was there, glaring down at him with pure fury. The assassin desperately tried to alert his master, but before a word could escape his lips, a bolt of lightning descended, turning him to ash. Lin's rage immediately turned on Ching. You told me the seas were clear, he roared. How did they get this close? The girl lowered her head in shame, apologizing for her grave failure. The next day, our protagonist returned home to look after his wife. Shinn was burning up with a fever, so he left her to rest.
Soon after, Lin summoned Long for a private discussion.
His wife stirred, whispering weakly. He rushed to her side, asking if she was okay. But Shinn's first words were for their daughter. Where is Ray?
Lin gently reassured her that Ray was safe with Dr. Lee.
Meanwhile, in another room, the doctor tried to assess Ray's condition. The little girl thought for a moment before saying she didn't know how she felt.
She would have to ask her father. At that very moment, Lin appeared, carrying Shinn in his arms, asking what was going on.
Ray ran into her mother's embrace, overjoyed to see her awake. The hero gently took his daughter, telling her to let her mother rest.
Dr. Lee's expression grew serious. He warned the Supreme that he needed to take the girl with him. Shinn's worry returned in an instant as she demanded to know why. Lin calmly explained that Ray had awakened the power of the royal bloodline and needed a master to guide her.
And there was no one in the world better suited for that task than Dr. Lee. The doctor explained further, revealing that a fierce war was raging in the Northwest, a war the royal family was hiding from the public to create a false peace. He added that Ray's awakening was unforeseen, and the one who currently rules the capital is their mortal enemy. Therefore, if Shinn and her daughter couldn't protect themselves, they would become the Supreme's greatest weakness.
Even after hearing the grim truth, Shinn refused to let her princess leave. She insisted Ray was just a child who should stay at home. Lee patiently tried to convince her, explaining he would only need to train the girl for a single year.
He promised to teach her everything he knew and swore on his life to protect her. Our hero left the final decision in his daughter's hands, promising not to force her either way.
Ray pictured the terrifying enemies her father had to face, and she trembled at the thought of him being crippled once again.
Her resolve was now absolute. To gain the power needed to protect him, she would follow the doctor, no matter the cost.
Lin praised her unwavering courage and urged them to move quickly before departing.
Ray handed her father a personal journal, a promise to keep it safe until her return. She confessed with a heavy heart that they hadn't spent enough time together since he had awakened. A shadow of sorrow crossed Lin's face as he apologized for his absence. But with no time to spare, Ray grabbed the doctor, vowing she would see them again.
Shinn didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. In the blink of an eye, her daughter was gone.
Outside, Ray strengthened her resolve to protect her parents at all costs. Inside, Lin reassured his wife that their daughter would be fine, but Shinn's heart was still unsettled. She looked at him, her voice trembling, and asked if he would leave again. Lin confirmed it. News had arrived from his agents in the Northwest, but he swore he would set everything in order before he left. The following day, they arrived at the Jian family village. Shin looked around in utter confusion, asking why they were there. Lin promised that the truth would soon come to light. At that very moment, her grandfather and cousin approached them. The old patriarch demanded to know the reason for their visit. Lin took an envelope from Ching and tossed it at the old man's feet. His command simple. Read it.
The documents held damning information, gathered by his subordinates only that morning.
As they read the reports, the color drained from both their faces, their expressions twisting into masks of horror. Lin then turned to Shin and revealed a soul-shattering truth. Her father's car crash was no mere accident. It was a planned attack, and the mastermind was Yan. Her cousin shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Lin while accusing him of forging the evidence. Enraged, the old man struck his granddaughter across the face, admitting he had been a blind fool for years. Shin was utterly shocked by his confession. Yan desperately tried to defend herself, screaming that she never murdered their third uncle. She tried to justify her actions, claiming she only meant to send a warning that the Jian family's assets belonged to her and her father. She never dreamed she would be provoking two absolute monsters. In the end, she added with a sneer, their uncle was just unlucky.
Those creatures tore him apart, so it wasn't my fault. The protagonist instantly understood her hidden meaning, suspecting others were involved in the so-called accident.
But Shin, confused by the twisted words, screamed at her cousin to explain everything clearly. Suddenly, a voice whispered from the shadows, warning its master that Lin had detected their presence. A cold laugh escaped Lin's lips. He remarked that the Jan family seemed to have grown powerful, yet they were still hiding rats within their walls. In a flash, Ching vanished, dashing toward the source of the voice with speed no human eye could follow. The old man begged Lin not to bring ruin upon the Jan family simply because of his displeasure. The protagonist replied calmly that he only wished to see the faces of the rats lurking in the darkness. Moments later, Ching burst into a hidden room, tackling a blue-haired man to the ground. The intruder simply laughed, saying his mission was complete and she could never hold him. He tried to break free, and a fierce, close-quarters battle erupted. Despite his struggles, Ching effortlessly neutralized him, dragging him back to the main hall and throwing him at her master's feet.
Realizing there was no escape, the man's body erupted in a terrifying transformation, two massive horns sprouting from his forehead.
Lin immediately recognized the signs of a royal bloodline mutation. Yan pointed at the creature, screaming that this was one of the monsters that had killed her uncle. The protagonist instantly moved in front of Shinn, shielding her from harm while leaving the battle to Qing.
The loyal subordinate materialized a gleaming dagger of pure energy in her hand.
The mutant snarled that he would finish her, then kill her master. With claws wreathed in flame, he lunged, but Qing moved with flawless precision. In an instant, her dagger flashed across his neck. The mutant collapsed, choking on his own lifeblood.
Yan stared in utter disbelief, unable to process how someone could fell such a monster with a single, perfect strike. As the enemy's body fell lifeless, Qing noticed an object in his possession. She retrieved it and handed it to her master.
Lin examined the small device, recognizing it as a communicator. Just then, a voice crackled through the speaker. It was Zhou, from the other side. He taunted Lin, asking how he knew. Lin's calm demeanor vanished, replaced by a chilling anger. He had spared this man at the banquet, but now his patience had reached its absolute limit. The Jan patriarch paled, terrified that Lin would confront Zhou, whose family held immense influence. He pleaded with Lin, begging him to remember the life debt he owed to the old master. Lin replied coldly that when Master Zhang saved his life, he had indeed promised to protect the Zhang family for 30 years. But that promise was utterly shattered the moment they dared to insult his wife. The bearded old man tried to argue, claiming that Yixin was the family heir and he should reconsider for her sake. Yan, consumed by fury, screamed at her grandfather that this family belonged to her. Ignoring the chaos, Lin turned to his wife and asked her to make the final decision.
Without a moment's hesitation, Shinn declared she would never go back, leaving her grandfather utterly stunned.
After such bitter betrayal, she had no desire to live with them, especially after they had cast her out. Respecting her decision, the protagonist took her hand and led her away. As the old man's desperate cries echoed behind them, Lin stated with cold certainty that Master Zhang would not be wronged. The Zhou family. He would deal with them personally. From that moment on, the debt between him and the Jan family had been paid in full. Outside, the old man and Yan seethed, their faces twisted with rage at how completely they had been defeated. As they walked, Lin informed his wife he would be gone for 2 days to settle a matter in the capital, leaving Qing to protect her. Yixin felt she was burdening her husband, but his subordinate reassured her it was merely one task that required his attention. Curiosity piqued. Shinn asked about this mysterious person in the capital whom Lin kept mentioning. Jing's answer was heavy. It was Shen Yin, the most powerful member of the royal family in the capital city. Though Shinn had never heard the name, a deep, unsettling feeling washed over her. Qing advised her to get in the car and return home while Lin handled the aftermath. A few hours later, at the Zhou family estate, the family patriarch was discussing their ongoing investigation. He complained with growing impatience that there was still no news about Lin or the Jan family. A man in a green hat warned him, "The young emperor is growing tired of waiting. The Zhou family has support now, but you will be abandoned if you prove useless." The head of the Zhou family nodded grimly, saying he understood. After all, his own son had been crushed by that very man. The green-hatted advisor suggested they exploit Lin's incomplete recovery and finish him off in a single, decisive strike. Suddenly, a deafening crash shattered the peace. Lin appeared, dragging the pathetic Zhou by his hair. His ice-cold gaze swept across the room, searching for the one in charge. The man in the green hat stepped forward, demanding to know who dared to trespass. Zhou, trembling in terror, screamed to his grandfather that this was Linfung. The old man erupted into hysterical laughter, mocking the protagonist for walking straight into his own grave. "You've saved us the trouble of hunting you down," he cackled. Striking the floor with his cane, he activated a mechanism, and a giant cage slammed down over Lin. He sneered, advising Lin to surrender the Yan family and renounce his royal blood if he wished to survive as a dog. Otherwise, he would never leave this place alive, and his head would be presented as a gift to the young emperor. Zhou's father cried out for the old man to wait, pointing out his own son was trapped inside with the monster. Zhou screamed for help. At last, the protagonist released his grip on Zhou, a cold smile on his face. "I truly hate being trapped with dogs," he said.
"The last time this happened, my enemy died screaming." Zhou shrieked again, calling out for his father in desperation.
The grandfather warned Lin he would be eliminated if he continued his defiance, revealing he didn't care one bit about his grandson's life. Pressing a button on his cane, he unleashed arcs of lightning into the cage. Zhou was instantly electrocuted, his screams filling the room while Lin stood unharmed, completely unaffected. Zhou's father pleaded for the old man to stop, but the patriarch replied coldly that losing a grandson was an acceptable price. The reward they would receive from the young master for Lin's head would be more than worth it. Mockingly, the protagonist asked if Shen Yan had already crowned himself the young emperor. He found it peculiar that the Zhou family's loyalty ran so deep, when Shen'an hadn't even bothered to warn them that these cheap tricks were useless against him. In the next instant, Lin gripped the bars and tore the cage apart with his bare hands. The old man stumbled back, shouting that he'd never witnessed such terrifying strength.
Calling for reinforcements, he summoned dozens of soldiers into the room.
Now feeling secure with his army, he ordered them to annihilate Lin. Bullets rained down on the protagonist, but they flattened harmlessly against his protective aura. He retaliated, dashing forward like a blur and taking down the snipers with his bare hands. A second wave launched specialized arrows, but Lin caught one from midair with just his fingers. The old man revealed they were special armor-piercing rounds, a weapon designed specifically to kill members of the royal family. A weapon now repurposed to serve the young emperor's ambition. The soldiers intensified their assault, unleashing a storm of ammunition while igniting gasoline barrels planted behind Lin. A massive explosion consumed the area. Convinced of his victory, the old man declared that even if his mansion was destroyed, the threat had been neutralized. His joy was short-lived. From the heart of the inferno, Lin emerged without a scratch, moving like a phantom. With a single, swift strike, his blade sliced through the air, and the patriarch's head fell lifelessly to the ground. The only one left alive was Zhou's father. Desperate, he screamed for their number one weapon to appear. Two monstrous figures entered the hall. Their boss reminded them that Master Shen had ordered the Jian family's complete extermination, and if they failed, they would be next. Lin immediately recognized their nature. They were mutants who had absorbed fragments of the royal bloodline. They swarmed him in a unified assault, hoping to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. But Lin was on another level. A single, devastating punch sent the blue-skinned monster flying, its body shattering the wall on impact. The red demon lunged from the shadows for a sneak attack, but was effortlessly blocked and tossed aside like a mere ragdoll. Their mutations granted them enhanced physical prowess, but it was utterly meaningless before the Supreme. Though he was curious about what made these mutants tick, Lin had no time to waste on research. Drawing a firearm from his case, he unleashed a volley of precise shots that tore through their defenses with ease. To finish it, the main character detonated a powerful explosive, engulfing the room in flames and ending the fight with one thunderous blast. Elsewhere, Zhou's father scrambled to his office to report to the young emperor. Shen Yan's face materialized on the screen, demanding answers. The man nervously explained that Lin had stormed the Zhou family compound and that they had deployed their number one weapon against him. The Dragon Lord's voice was cold as ice as he demanded to speak with the family patriarch. The new boss couldn't admit his father had already fallen to the Supreme. He spun a desperate lie, claiming the old man was still locked in battle.
Shen scoffed. "Stop your pathetic lies! The despair is written all over your face." At that moment, a hand pierced the man's shoulder, and crackling lightning consumed his body.
The protagonist had finally found Shen. The Dragon Lord laughed, a chilling sound. As expected of the Supreme, to dare walk into the Zhou family's den alone and even dismantle their ultimate weapon. Lin admitted the special armor-piercing bullets could harm the royal bloodline, but mocked his foe. You forgot the weapon is useless without the containment method. In his mind, Shen cursed the Zhou family's incompetence, calling them absolute fools. Lin tapped his own head, tauntingly saying that Shen needed more than just power to keep up with him. The Dragon Lord calmly replied that the royal family was already his puppet, and the only reason Lin still drew breath was due to his public reputation. He then offered a twisted opportunity. "Obey me, and you will witness the act of a true Supreme." The protagonist retorted that Shen had slaughtered countless royals for his own glory, calling his words utterly ridiculous.
Shen called Lin naive, claiming sacrifice was a necessary price for absolute power.
Suddenly, a beeping countdown grabbed the hero's attention. It was a self-destruct bomb, a final trap left by the Zhou family. Shen's voice echoed with glee. "My supreme artifact is gone, but it's foolish to think you've won this fight." At that instant, a massive explosion consumed the entire mansion. Miles away, at the main character's home, Shin jolted awake from a terrible premonition. She desperately tried to call her husband to make sure he was safe, but the number was unavailable.
Hearing the noise, Qing entered the room and asked if something was wrong. Shin explained that she was terrified for Lin after suffering a horrifying nightmare. Her subordinate assured her the master was fine, but offered to open the emergency contact channel if she truly needed to speak with the Supreme. Shin knew a call could distract her husband at a critical moment. Reluctantly, she gave up the idea and told Qing to go and rest.
Her subordinate agreed, asking to be called if needed. Shin returned to bed, whispering that she was sure Lin would be all right. The next day, Shin was rushed to the Bain High Center Hospital after her condition from the night before worsened. The protagonist was there in an instant, confronting the doctor and demanding to know what had happened. The doctor explained that after several tests, she seemed to be fine. It was likely just exhaustion, and she would recover with some rest.
Lin stared at the doctor intently. "Is there anything else?" The doctor hesitated before confessing he had found something strange. He had performed a complete examination and detected an abnormal electrical discharge in her brain while she was asleep.
Handing the report to Lin, he elaborated that the anomaly resembled a neural shock or a psychiatric disorder, suspecting the nightmare was a symptom of recent stress.
He promised to monitor her condition carefully and would confirm his findings later. Outside the hospital, a crowd was gathering in protest. The people were chanting,
demanding to hear from the Chinese head of state. Lin watched the chaos from the window, his expression grim. Suddenly, Qing burst into the infirmary in a state of panic. She cried out that the situation in the northwest had completely spiraled out of the royal family's control. The internet was exploding with news about the battle. Lin finally understood the reason for the people's outrage in the streets. He questioned if the military units in the west and north had taken any action. His subordinate replied that their informants confirmed both military departments had been compromised by spies. Shen Yin was completely overwhelmed by the chaos, and because of it, the secrecy contract was broken, exposing the entire truth to the nation. Jing added that people all over the world had started online petitions, demanding that the general take the commander's position. She watched, waiting to see what move Lin would make. The main character understood the people's demand. They wanted Binhai City's military commander expelled, for his deep connections to the royal family. Now, the citizens roared Lin's name, pleading for him to take command. He weighed the heavy decision, then ordered Qing to secure the area in his absence. The scene cuts to an army office. Long's anger flared as someone burst in without knocking, only to vanish when he saw who it was. Lin immediately scolded him. How could he possibly sleep while the entire Northwest was engulfed in chaos? The soldiers snapped back to reality. Lin explained he wasn't here to give orders, but to ask Long to join him on a mission to the Northwest. Long immediately objected, arguing that no expedition force could move without an official commander. But Lin clarified this was no expedition. He simply needed Long to come with him. The soldier, still unaware of the news, was shocked. As Lin revealed the situation had already exploded online, instantly fired up, Long declared all he needed was a gun, to hunt down every last invader one by one. He swore to follow his old master, to win this battle and save China. Minutes later, a helicopter descended, ready to extract them from the army rooftop. Wang was waiting there to receive his final orders before Lin's departure. Our protagonist handed him the emblem of his private force, the Hijia army. The fate of Binhai City was now in Wang's hands. He instructed Wang to use the emblem only as a last resort, to provoke the black armored army. Wang smiled, promising his master the city would remain under his control. Holding the badge, he then produced a pocket watch and handed it to Lin. Inside was a photo of Shinn, a keepsake she wanted him to have. Lin thanked him, promising he would return for her, alive. Long tried to pull his friend back to the mission, saying love dulls a warrior's edge, and they needed to move now. But as they prepared to board, a voice shouted for them to wait. Surprised, the main character asked how he found them. The blue-haired man simply replied that no place in China was beyond his reach. Lin was thrilled by Fun's sudden appearance, but Long was stunned to see the legendary Dragon Master standing right before him. Lin declared that with this man's help, their chances of victory had just skyrocketed. The three warriors boarded the airship and departed from Binhai City. During the flight, Fun explained the true purpose of the Dragon Master title. It was originally granted to commoners without royal blood, to control the military and keep the royal family's power in check. However, Fun had been so engrossed in his research that he never saw Shenyin's assassins coming for him. He was abducted and held under house arrest, forced to research the fusion of royal bloodlines with their own descendants. Lin cut to the chase, asking if the research had been a success. Fun didn't hold back. Initially, the fusion worked. Shen Yan had used the corpses of countless kings to suppress his own bloodline's rebellion. Fun only managed to break free because the ritual itself had delayed Shen Yan's plans. Lin expressed his relief that he was now safe. Just then, the pilot announced they were 50 miles from Yingxiao City. The soldiers stood and opened the door, ready to drop. Before they leaped, Lin warned them there would be no reinforcements for this mission. He asked if they were truly ready. Long and Fun roared back that they were. Together, the three warriors leaped from the helicopter. Sometime later, the group arrived in Yingxiao, deep in the northwest. Long immediately noticed all communications were down, and any intel about the territory had been completely wiped. He decided to approach a local for information, introducing himself as a member of the China Task Force. The door was slammed in his face. Long instantly realized they were not welcome in this city. Our hero said they would find the information themselves, and asked Long to check the map for their distance to the fort. Long replied that beyond the sprawling sand dunes, they still had 30 kilometers to go. But as they formulated their next move, they were being watched by a small boy hiding behind the rocks. The protagonist approached him, offering a piece of chocolate for information. Then he asked if the boy knew where the headquarters were. The boy snatched the candy without hesitation, and asked if the Chinese soldiers were truly here to fight the bandits. When Lin confirmed, the boy simply told them to follow him. Along the way, the group learned a disturbing truth. Several intruders from the royal family had already infiltrated Yingxiao. Spinning a key on his finger, the boy explained that no one here would dare help them. His own father had changed ever since his brother was killed. All the brave men of this place had been murdered. So now,
No one dared to pass on information.
He warned that he would help them only once. If that wasn't enough, they were on their own. Using the key, the boy opened a door, revealing a hidden shelter. Within the compound, they found more Chinese soldiers, their bodies ravaged by deep scars and grievous wounds. The boy proudly declared that he and his father had saved these very men just last year. But the soldiers' eyes were filled with terror. They couldn't tell if Lin's group were allies or a new kind of enemy. Lin, however, recognized their dialect belonged to this city. He lowered his weapon just enough, assuring them he wasn't here to protect the royal family. He came only with one request for them to defend their own home. Meanwhile, the invaders known as the Sandwolves got word that more soldiers had appeared. Their leader fired his pistol into the sky, demanding the villagers surrender the soldiers immediately. He promised them riches for their cooperation, but not a single soul dared to step outside. The same man who had slammed the door on Long now trembled inside his home as the intruders began to tear his door down. The leader, a man marked by a menacing neck tattoo, roared that if they weren't given the soldiers' location, the entire village would burn to the ground. But unseen by the raging bandits, a long-range weapon was already locked onto its targets. The Sandwolves had no idea they were already in the crosshairs. Believing victory was theirs, they prepared to torch the homes and force the people out. Suddenly, a single, silent shot found its mark. One of the intruders dropped dead. A hole drilled through his skull. His partner spun around, desperately searching for the ghost that had attacked them. Lin emerged from the darkness and neutralized him without a sound. The Sandwolves were completely unprepared for the terrifying strength and precision of this one soldier. The attack was so silent. The remaining bandits kept threatening the villagers, oblivious that death itself was stalking them from behind. Lin tossed a stone to grab one's attention, mocking him. "Your level of alertness is truly astonishing." The startled mercenary turned, firing wildly with both guns. But Lin disarmed him with contemptuous ease. Lin's voice was ice. "You could never win with mere firearms." In that moment of shock, the intruder realized who stood before him. The Supreme himself. The protagonist slammed him to the ground, the barrel of his gun pressed against the man's forehead. "Pay more attention. In your next life." A single shot echoed, ending the man's existence. Another intruder saw the slaughter and tried to flee, only to be caught trying to ambush Lin. Trembling, he fell to his knees, begging for his life. Lin asked him a simple question. "Did you spare the people of the Northwest?" The man's silence was his death sentence. He, too, was eliminated. Through a crack in his door, the villager had witnessed the entire brutal spectacle. Lin turned to the man's hiding spot, ordering him to stay inside until every last intruder was dealt with. The man quickly agreed, asking if China had truly come to save them. Lin's reply was simple yes. Minutes later, Sandwolf reinforcements swarmed the area.
Our hero took a position atop a roof, gaining a perfect vantage point on the approaching enemy. At the perfect moment, he descended like a phantom, twin pistols blazing, dropping multiple targets while the others scattered in terror.
From his window, the old man watched in utter disbelief as a single soldier fought against an entire swarm. The main character then switched to close quarters combat, his fists becoming devastating weapons that neutralized intruder after intruder. The villager was suddenly reminded of the only other time he'd seen such terrifying power. From the man leading the Sandwolves, the reinforcement commander grew furious. Realizing his men were paralyzed with fear by a single Chinese soldier, he screamed at them, calling them pathetic cowards. But then, a chilling silence fell over his squad, and his own blood ran cold. In that instant, Lin appeared directly behind him, having just silently dispatched the mercenary at his side. The commander raised his gun in a panic, but Lin simply crushed the barrel with his bare hand. Two nearby soldiers saw this and chose to run, abandoning their leader to save themselves.
The rest of the squad followed their lead, fleeing for their lives at full speed.
From a mountain perch, the protagonist's team waited, raining down precision fire upon the retreating invaders.
Cornered, the enemy boss called Lin a coward for daring to point a gun at an armed combatant.
Lin stared at her with icy contempt. "And you think it was honorable when your people pointed their weapons at the unarmed citizens of this country?" To him, there was no glory in forcing the people of China into endless misery, fighting for every inch of their own land. The boss just smirked. "You're not wrong." She dared him to shoot if he had the guts. But she then revealed a crucial piece of leverage: information on how to find their headquarters. As she spoke, she removed her cap, revealing that she was a woman. Their tense standoff was interrupted by Long, who reported that the mercenaries who fled Yingo City had been surrounded and completely wiped out. He immediately stopped talking when he saw the mysterious woman speaking so casually with Lin. Suddenly, she sneered, claiming her head ached just looking at the supreme trash, the puppet Dragon Master, and his little follower named Long. It was clear. She knew exactly who her enemies were. Long leveled his barrel at her head. How dare she insult the Dragon Master and the Supreme the woman? Desperate, tried to propose a deal for her life. She would reveal the headquarters location. but only if they let her go. Lin's voice was ice. He didn't bargain with unknowns. She tried to play her hand, posturing as if she held some vital importance. His patience worn thin. Lin's hand shot out, clamping around her throat like a vice and hoisting her off the ground, starved of air. She finally broke. Gasping for breath, she choked out her destination Eaglehead Castle. She collapsed to the floor, lungs burning, muttering in disbelief. She knew the Supreme had awakened, but to regain his power this fast, it was impossible. For the first time, true fear for her life gripped her. Lin, unfazed, began to issue his commands. Long would watch the girl. Fun's mission was to rally their forces in Eagle Point City.
From this moment forward, that city would be their one and only fortress. They had to protect it at all costs.
Fun acknowledged his orders, immediately placing the wounded Chinese commander in charge of organizing the troops, later, with her hands bound. The girl guided them.
She revealed the Sandwolf squad patrolled twice a day. If a team didn't report back, they would send reinforcements.
The protagonist cut her off. How much further to Eaglehead Castle? She answered vaguely, claiming it was just over the next few dunes. But a quick glance at the map told Fun she was lying.
They were moving in the complete opposite direction, heading for the desolate edge of the desert.
Long cocked his pistol, his voice a low growl. She shouldn't test him. His patience was wearing thin. The mercenary feigned innocence, claiming she was trying to save Lin from facing 10,000 men alone. She insisted she was trying to help. Before Lin could even speak, a yellow buggy launched over a dune, landing before them in a shower of sand.
The protagonist's eyes narrowed. Who are they?
She explained they were the Vultures patrol team, the most ruthless squad in the Eaglehead group, infamous for slaughtering any Chinese they found. The enemy squad disembarked. Their bald leader sneered, declaring the girl was his, and his men could have the rest. In a flash, Lin snatched a knife from his partner. A blur of steel and shadow carved through the entire Vulture squad. The woman stood frozen in utter shock. The strongest battalion had been annihilated in a single, terrifying instant. The protagonist snapped her from her stupor as he calmly returned the dagger. His voice was deadly serious. This was her final chance to tell the truth. She finally confessed, admitting she could lead them there, but warned them Eaglehead Castle was a fortress. Easy to defend, nearly impossible to attack. With 24-hour sensor recognition and battlefield radar, the immediate threat was whether the Sandwolves already knew they were coming. Fun scoffed, revealing he had already handled it. Hacking their repeaters and intercepting their surveillance feed was child's play for him. Long couldn't help but praise his partner's genius. Lin cut them short. It was time to move. Moments later, their stolen vehicle tore across the desert toward Eaglehead Castle. The mercenary warned them they were approaching the perimeter.
At that very moment, a sniper's crosshairs settled on their vehicle.
The shooter paused, recognizing the buggy, but a closer look sent a chill down his spine. The man behind the wheel was not his leader. Lin had already sensed the hidden sentries. At the perfect moment, he gave the order for Long to fire. His soldiers scrambled onto the roof, taking out the Vulture snipers one by one. Bodies tumbled from the dunes as their car plowed through the remaining guards. The mercenary cried out that this was suicide. They would be sitting ducks.
Lin replied with chilling calm. Who said we were sneaking in?
Sentinels rushed toward the commotion, only to look up in horror. Lin's car soared over their heads, leaving them in a cloud of dust and utter despair. A soldier scrambled for the intruder alarm, but Long was faster. His shot hit a nearby barrel of gasoline, triggering a chain of fiery explosions. The mercenaries screamed that there were countless Chinese hostages inside. Long's rampage could kill them all by accident. The protagonist completely ignored her warning. He turned to Fun, asking only one question. How much longer to breach the enemy's defense system? The Dragon Master checked his device, confirming it was almost done. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. An aircraft descended from the sky, locking onto their car.
The mercenaries shrieked in terror. It was an armed reconnaissance craft from the Sandwolf squadron. They had to escape.
Lin simply yelled for Long to take the wheel. Then, in a stunning move, he leaped from the speeding vehicle. The soldiers in the aircraft could only stare in disbelief as the protagonist soared through the air, appearing right outside their window. A Vulcan cannon beneath the aircraft swiveled to engage, but Lin simply grabbed the weapon and tore it from its mounting with his bare hands. Another thunderous explosion rips across the sky. Long erupts in laughter, knowing only his boss could unleash such power. The main character returns to the car and simply tells Long to come with him. Meanwhile, behind the walls of Eaglehead Castle, the garrison is already aware of the intruders. They scramble into a defensive line, but the main gate is utterly obliterated by a torrent of lightning.
The protagonist's eyes glow a menacing red as his power activates. The stolen car smashes through the wreckage, and they storm the fortress.
In the ensuing chaos, countless soldiers of the Vulture squad are instantly annihilated. Lin continues to radiate an insane level of power, so intense that the very ground cracks beneath his feet. Suddenly, a nearby stone wall bursts open from within. The commander of Eaglehead Castle watches with a smirk, wondering who this monster could possibly be. Lin then spots a tank rolling towards him, its cannon already taking aim. The castle soldiers let out a roar, cheering for the arrival of Chief Ding. A shell screams from the tank, hurtling straight for our hero. He dodges it effortlessly, and with a single powerful kick, sends the explosive projectile flying back toward the castle's men. More soldiers are wiped out in the blast, sending the boss into a rage. He screams at Lin not to underestimate him as he tries to crush the hero under the tank's treads. But it's useless. Lin grabs the war machine with his bare hands and unleashes a devastating surge of electricity through its metal frame. Ding feels the overwhelming chi radiating from Lin, but his arrogance doesn't waver. He fires another shell at point-blank range. Incredibly, Lin catches the bomb with his bare hand, stopping it dead. Another explosion erupts. Yet the protagonist stands completely unharmed. He calls Ding a cowardly rat before breaching the castle's inner defenses. Inside, he locates the room where the hostages are being kept. A mother clutches her son, her voice trembling as she asks if he was sent by China to save them. Lin gives a sharp nod, ordering the hostages to follow his lead. Outside, his team clashes brutally with the remaining castle soldiers.
Long plows through the enemy ranks with sheer excitement, then leaps from the car, dragging the mercenary along with him.
At that moment, someone cries out, "Sister Yi Bing!" The freed hostage runs and embraces the girl, sobbing that he thought she was dead. The mercenary girl cracks a genuine smile, overjoyed to see that he is okay. The little boy, however, glares at Long, demanding to know why he tied up his sister. Our hero's reply is chillingly simple. "This beautiful girl," he says, "is a demon who murders without a second thought." The boy screams that it isn't true, shouting that they all would have been killed if not for Sister Yibing. He defiantly unties her himself, begging her to tell everyone she is not a bad person. Just then, the other hostages surge forward, all of them confirming the boy's story.
They explain that they were travelers trapped on China's northwest border by the fighting. It was Yibing who came and saved them all.
Upon hearing the truth, the protagonist frees her. The mercenary states that he can rest easy now, knowing her hands have never been stained with the blood of their people. She confesses her true identity, a secret agent sent deep undercover into the Sandwolf Squad, tasked with feeding information to the Chinese army. During her mission, she discovered a crucial piece of intelligence. The three major factions, the Sandwolves, the Ancient Snake, and the Grizzly Bear, are locked in a war against each other. In a situation this chaotic, the smartest move is to retreat. Yibing suggests it, though she knows a man like Lin would never back down. And she was right. Lin orders Long to escort the hostages back to the city. The soldier protests, worried about him. But our hero's resolve is like steel. He will advance and retake China's lands. Long just laughs at that, declaring he will follow him to the very end. Yibing insists on joining them as well, claiming that no one wants to reclaim that territory more than she does. She argues that without someone who knows the terrain, finding the territory of the Ancient Snake Clan is utterly impossible. The protagonist resists at first, saying someone must stay to protect the hostages. But both Long and Yibing passionately plead their case. Lin finally decides the best plan is to gather supplies so they can all leave together. Once the immediate problems are solved, his thoughts turn to his wife. Hoping with all his heart that she is safe, the scene then shifts to the Axon Corporation's property. Ching suggests that the main character's wife, Shinn, get some sleep. As she's been awake since the day before, Shinn doesn't even respond. The subordinate tries to persuade her, saying the Supreme wouldn't be happy to know how hard his love has been working for their new company.
Shinn merely says she must help the country, just as everyone else is doing their part.
Her research has revealed that after one of the partners completely broke away from the Jin family, he founded a new company, one capable of rivaling the Mei family. This information might not seem to help the country directly, but Shinn is certain that Binhai City is about to be plunged into chaos. Her eyes drift to a frame holding their family photo, Lin and Rui. They are the most important people in her entire life. The subordinate, deeply moved, makes a silent promise to the protagonist. She will help his wife stabilize the situation in Binhai City and will not disappoint him. Night descends quickly over the harsh landscape. The protagonist sets up camp, lying down while gazing at his wife's photo inside his pocket watch. He kisses the image, promising that he will return to her soon. With the dawn came a bittersweet farewell, as the hostages gathered their remaining supplies. Fortunately, they had more than enough to survive the journey ahead. The old man expressed his deepest gratitude, assuring our hero that his people would reach Eagle City without fail. Lin nodded, his duty fulfilled. Hours later, they arrived at the most chaotic city in the entire Northwest. The invaders had carved a path of pure destruction through its streets. Ying grimly stated they had no choice but to push forward.
Long glanced at his boss, seeking orders, only to find the protagonist had already surged ahead into the chaos.
He moved to follow, but froze. Ying and Fun were staring at their map, their faces pale with shock. They were standing in the heart of no man's land. "What does that mean?" Long asked. Ying's voice was grim. It means this territory has no master, a dead zone where superpowers cease to exist. As if on cue, our hero's flight sputtered. The energy vanished, and he began to plummet from the sky.
Long blurted out how cool it looked, earning a sharp rebuke from Ying. "This is a disaster," she cried, as Lin continued his uncontrolled descent. Elsewhere, a woman bathed peacefully in her private high-rise pool. Her tranquility was shattered as the glass ceiling exploded, and Lin crashed into the water right before her eyes.
Her subordinate scrambled to her side as the protagonist struggled, trying to understand why his immense power had suddenly abandoned him. A moment later, the cold steel of a gun pressed against his head. The guard didn't know him, but the woman in the pool certainly did. She recognized him instantly. The Supreme. How had he managed to enter no man's land so quickly? A dangerous curiosity sparked in her eyes. She wrapped her arms around Lin from behind, her voice a seductive whisper. "Will you consent to be my lover?"
Our protagonist's reply was instant and cold. "I'm married." But she snapped back, refusing to be dismissed, determined to claim him. She made a daring, intimate advance.
In a flash, Lin's hand clamped around her wrist like a vice. His voice was laced with ice as he warned her he wouldn't hesitate to break it. "Permission to fire," the subordinate yelled. Our hero's patience snapped. With a surge of pure physical might, he shattered the weapon in the man's hand. The woman was now utterly captivated, even stripped of his supernatural abilities. Lin's raw strength and combat prowess were on another level. Her muscular guard threw a desperate, earth-shattering punch, kicking up a massive cloud of smoke that forced everyone back. The man was too proud to admit he was outmatched. He growled, "Let's just tie him up and sell him." The girl erupted in fury at his stupidity. "How do you plan to tie him up when you can't even land a hit on him?" She calmed herself, her mind racing. "We need a plan. Something that will earn us the South Supreme's protection." All the while, the smoke billowed endlessly. From deep within the haze, the woman's voice called out, asking her man to bring her something to wear. Suddenly, our protagonist burst from the smoke like a phantom, charging straight for them. The guard frantically threw up his hands. Wait! My master is dressing. It is dishonorable to attack a lady in such a state." But it was too late. Now fully clothed, she stepped forward. "I'll be taking you with me," she declared. "What do you say to that?" He replied without hesitation. "I'm here to annihilate the sandwolves, and that includes you." The woman simply smiled, completely unfazed. "Oh, I have a feeling you'll agree to my terms," revealing a silhouette designed to tempt saints and sinners alike. She purred. "I possess something you desperately want." And for a moment, he wondered if she was right. But our hero knew better than to be deceived by a beautiful facade. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Does this woman know my true identity? Is this all part of a plan to blackmail me? But she spoke again, her tone shifting. "The Supreme must have noticed the strange magnetic field affecting this world. The one that interferes with special abilities."
"Without your powers," she explained, "even you would face a struggle for survival here."
He scoffed, saying it wouldn't be a problem. But she continued, revealing a shocking secret about an ancient, mysterious seal in the Earth's core, directly linked to the magnetic field. "If you can remove that seal," she promised, "your powers will no longer be suppressed on this planet. And to find it, you must place your absolute trust in me. Are you willing to cooperate?" He could sense the venom hidden beneath her sweet words. "What are your true intentions?" he demanded. But their standoff was cut short by an intruder, pointing a gun. "Are you the one who fired that shot?" It seems the woman's guard had been captured in the confusion, completely unnoticed by anyone. The newcomer addressed our protagonist as boss, warning him that the gunshots likely alerted others. He asked how many enemies were coming, and which tribe they belonged to. "They're from the Sandwolves tribe," the captured guard confessed. Our hero knew it was time to move, but the seductive woman interjected, her every curve a deliberate distraction. "Our goals are aligned," she insisted. "We should work together." The man holding the gun blushed, his mind clearly wandering to other places. The temptations were blatant, but the woman's ally suddenly drew her own weapon. "We can't afford to be careless," she warned. Our protagonist, of course, was utterly unmoved. In his experience, women were deadly weapons by nature. All he saw was one deadly weapon holding another. While they negotiated, outside the building, shadowy figures armed with low-resolution rifles were closing in. The woman smirked at her friend. "Time to get into character." In the next instant, the entire floor was mysteriously flooded with water. The men retreated to a back door to take cover. Just then, the invaders burst in, only to stop dead in their tracks, staring at two stunning women in immaculate outfits. In an instant, they are ensnared by the seductive aura hanging in the air. A woman's voice, like a siren's call, asks if they'd like to join the fun. Convinced they know exactly what she means, they eagerly start shedding their clothes. They lunge for the women, but in a flash, the white-haired girl ducks, dragging her companion underwater with her. And just like that, Hidden soldiers unleash a storm of bullets, cutting down every man lost in his final fantasy. The trap was perfect. The two sirens were completely safe beneath the surface. And once more, what stunning figures. They rise from their watery ambush, dripping with deadly beauty. Too bad that accursed smoke immediately ruins the view we were all waiting for. And yup, it's still there. These two don't even know each other.
The woman breaks the silence. My name is Binji. She then asks the white-haired girl for her name. I am Suli, she declares, leader of the ancient snakes. With eyes narrowed, Binji questions what she truly means by leader.
The air crackles with mutual suspicion. Just then, our protagonist steps forward. The job is finished. A man in the back asks if they can get some help carrying the bodies. But the pink-haired guy just cheers. Now that was a refreshing victory. Another man, a true sycophant, rushes to praise his master, declaring how hard she must have worked. But this absurd display doesn't faze our hero one bit. His mind is already dissecting the snake leader's true objective. Meanwhile, the scene shifts. A woman is deeply thanking a man for all he has done for her. Without his aid, she admits, none of this would have been possible. The man humbly replies that he was simply fulfilling his duty. As a matter of fact, he hands her a document, a list of every member in Binhai's political and business alliance. As the blonde girl scans the papers, she sees name after name of powerful figures who pull the strings of politics. She notes that all of them belong to emerging powers. The man explains that she currently lacks the resources to join the established police and business alliance. She accepts this truth and expresses her sincere gratitude. She knows that without the help of many, especially the Wang family, she'd have never climbed so high, let alone become president. After a moment of thought, she accepts the man's proposal. Then she makes a bold counterproposal. They should forge an alliance with those emerging powers. The man is taken aback by her sheer audacity. She continues, revealing data on a distorted magnetic field that leeches bloodline energy. The very thing Shen Yan and his ritual are desperately seeking. This information clearly unnerves the man. He reveals they found a traitor in the military who was studying the meteorite. But in a heartbeat, his tone shifts.
He declares this only proves how incredibly valuable the meteorite truly is.
She agrees, ordering him to use the lab as a front to attract more investment. He is also to create a new team and expand their operations once the Northwest is stabilized. An agreement is reached, and they move on. Once again, the man praises her, calling her decision brilliant. Another woman joins in, offering her congratulations to Miss Zhang. A thoughtful smile plays on her lips as an old saying comes to mind. The husband handles external affairs, the wife handles internal ones. She silently wonders if she is fulfilling her role well. Later that night, Binhai's grand banquet hall is alive with celebration. A man calls for silence, ready to give a congratulatory speech. He announces the grand arrival of President Jiang Shui. She enters in a breathtaking gown that highlights her every perfect curve. Taking the microphone, she thanks everyone for their attendance and their unwavering support.
On behalf of her entire organization, she offers her heartfelt congratulations. The party resumes as elites mingle and exchange pleasantries.
Amidst the revelry, the girl in the white cloak remains perfectly still, lost in her own thoughts.
She makes a silent vow to protect everyone, no matter what it takes. The scene cuts back to our protagonist's group, surrounded by wreckage.
The man with the braided hair is getting bandaged from his injuries. The girl teases him. You look so tough, but you're so sensitive to a little pain. Whining like a child, he complains he had no idea the grass itself could be that poisonous. Another girl is completely fed up. All she asked was for him to clear the area, and somehow he got poisoned by grass. How utterly ridiculous. The man offers a weak apology, his attention clearly captivated by a far more amazing sight. Too bad that damned white smoke is blocking our view as well. But not for much longer. The smoke finally parts. One woman asks about the exit, claiming she could help since she knows the area so well. But the tension between the two leaders is electrifying.
You can find your own way out, the other retorts. As they argue, our hero watches the entire ridiculous drama unfold in silence.
Finally, losing her patience, the white-haired woman orders her guards to attack the other girl. But her subordinate hesitates. He can't bring himself to do it. How could he possibly strike someone with such soft, beautiful skin? His leader, naturally, is enraged. He would betray his loyalty for something so pathetically shallow. Meanwhile, the girl who is about to be attacked simply laughs, thoroughly amused by the entire chaotic scene. It was almost laughable, watching this woman attempt to command such a bumbling crew. As she watched, the pink-haired man swaggered over, demanding to know what she found so amusing. They both stared at the scene, and he had to admit, it was a complete circus. The woman seethed that being ugly wasn't the crime. The real sin was being ugly and utterly incompetent. The target of her scorn tried to defend his honor, claiming that while he might be ugly and useless, at least he possessed humility, as if that was some kind of virtue. Finally, their leader had heard enough, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. He declared the foolishness was over. They had a single objective to focus on.
Petty squabbles were a luxury they couldn't afford. That commanding presence left the girl completely starstruck. She praised his authority and asked for his plan.
The protagonist's friend murmured that his power was on another level. Supreme Ling was a name earned, not given. But he was a man forged without a shred of compassion. Meanwhile, the girl in the back seethed with annoyance. Humans, with their tangled emotions and pointless arguments, were truly insufferable creatures. A lone bird streaked across the sky, a meaningless sight, as their vehicle finally rolled to a stop at a new destination. A warning was issued. They were approaching the territory of the ancient serpents. The pink-haired man raised his rifle, declaring the bird's flight was grating on his nerves. He decided it was time for a fresh meal. But his companion urged caution. You can't just consume any creature out here. What if it carried some unknown disease? Of course, that warning fell on deaf ears as he fired. The bullet found its mark, striking not just any bird, but a vulture. A single drop of crimson blood splattered onto the shooter's head. Yet the creature didn't fall from the sky. He questioned if his aim was off, but he knew he'd hit his target. A closer look revealed the horrifying truth. He had hit something, but it wasn't the vulture. He'd shot the severed hand the creature was carrying in its talons. Undeterred, he grinned. Now, it was time to bring it down for good. He lined up his sights for a second shot, but was interrupted. The annoyed girl's power began to flare to life as she focused her energy, preparing to strike. But once again, that infernal white smoke shrouded the area, ruining her moment. Just as she was about to unleash her attack, a thunderous crack stunned them all.
The vulture plummeted from the sky, crashing lifelessly at their feet. The one who had taken it down with a single, perfect shot was the protagonist.
No wasted movements, no mistakes. They moved in to investigate the grotesque object the bird had been carrying in its beak. The woman watched on, her gut telling her something was deeply wrong. This kind of dark omen was not normal, even in the lands of the ancient serpents. The main character approached her, remarking on the tribe's bizarre welcoming party, before asking what she was holding. She explained it was the double serpent scepter, a sacred relic of her people. It was meant to control the beasts of this land, but for some reason, it had absolutely no effect on that vulture. But our hero's attention wasn't on the bird. He was focused on the true horror, a severed human arm. Why would a vulture be carrying such a thing?
Where could it have come from? The man with glasses stepped forward, asking for permission to examine the limb.
He noted the blood was still fresh. This meant its owner was either still alive, or had died very, very recently.
Based on the skin and muscle tone, the arm belonged to a member of the old snake tribe. The woman's face went pale with shock.
She hadn't realized the victim was one of her own kin. At that exact moment, a chilling gust of wind swept through, pulling their gaze toward the village.
A terrible thought crossed her mind. Had the enemy already begun their assault? The scene then shifts dramatically. We are now in the central gymnasium of Binhai City. A commander analyzes a tactical map, marking the positions of the great families to the east, west, and north.
With the flames of war spreading, their scouts were on the move, but enemy spies could be lurking anywhere. They had to strike before the main army advanced. The fear was palpable. Enemy scouts, or perhaps even elite soldiers, may have already infiltrated the city of Binhai. The woman roared, demanding to know if the black armored army was prepared to defend the family of Supreme Lee. After a tense beat, the soldiers roared back in a unified chorus. They were ready. She nodded, proud of their unwavering spirit. Just then, a man with an eye patch rushed forward with an urgent report. He yelled that the Azure Dragon had already deployed special forces along the 8 major streets of Binhai. The woman exploded in anger, questioning his stupidity for shouting classified intelligence. But the secret was out. She ordered him to pinpoint their exact locations on the map. The man awkwardly scratched his shoulder, promising to show her immediately. He approached the map and declared the Azure Dragon was positioned, right where he thought they were. The truth was, he'd completely forgotten. After a moment, he pointed randomly to Hong Kong Street. Then he quickly changed his mind. Wait, no. Maybe it's the Lufang Clinic. Qing's eyes widened. The Lufang Clinic? That's where Rui and Dr. Li were stationed.
Without a second's hesitation, she decided to investigate every location marked with unusual activity, ordering the officer to accompany her.
Her subordinate felt a sense of dread. It seemed the enemy already knew she would plant spies in the city center. If that were true, their foe was already one step ahead. As they moved through the desolate streets, Qing demanded to know where his men were. The officer pointed nervously toward a dark corner. They pushed forward, and the subordinate questioned if the officer had arrived by vehicle or traveled on foot. Azure claims she'll sense their arrival, but a cold suspicion grips Qing. A traitor lurks within the Black Armor Army. The officer seems too simple-minded, yet he's the only one who fits the profile. Qing recalls his past a petty thief constantly beaten for his greed. An insatiable hunger always drove him. Even the honor of the Black Armor Army couldn't quell his avarice.
A part of Ching wants to end him right now, but his superior's shadow looms large. She decides to wait, to draw the serpent into her own domain.
Just as planned, she encounters the special forces planted by the officer. In a flash, she moves, neutralizing the two men before they even know what happened. One of the captured spies glares at Azure. "You lied to us." But in that instant, the man activates a hidden device. The show is about to begin. He smirks. Headlights flare to life as engines roar. Ching is completely surrounded.
With her specialized gear, she launches into the air, scoffing. Is this mediocre trap the best you can do? Her primary target is the traitor, but his allies floor it, aiming to crush her. With immense strength, Ching kicks the vehicles aside like toys and locks her eyes back on her prey.
But her powerful kick is stopped cold. Landing gracefully, the soldier taunts her. "Did you forget our squad's armor is specially reinforced?" Azure's cruel laugh echoes. "You think we chose this parking lot by chance?" The remaining cars speed towards her once more. A triumphant grin spreads across the soldier's face. But suddenly, an invisible force seizes him and all his allies. Even Ching feels herself being lifted into the air. This immense pressure? It's Rui, using her lineage power. Her subordinate's face lights up with joy. It's the little princess's strength. The traitor's fatal mistake was luring Ching to a parking lot right next to the clinic. From a window, Dr. Lee gives the girl a proud thumbs up. Rui cries out that she missed Ching. The subordinate gently pats her head, whispering, "You were absolutely amazing." The doctor chuckles. Those fools never could have imagined the power dwelling within that little girl. "I tried my best to be strong and protect my family," Rui says. Just then, the main character's wife rushes to her daughter, her face beaming.
Ching had called Shinn the very moment she felt Rui's supernatural power activate.
They share a warm embrace as her mother bombards her with questions. "Did you eat well during your cultivation? Did you listen to Master Lee's orders?" The man admits with a wry smile. "She listened, for the most part." Ching quickly changes the subject, congratulating the main character's wife on their alliance.
Shinn's smile fades slightly. "Actually, I needed to talk to you about that."
The sorrow in her eyes says it all. "It's much harder than I ever imagined," she confesses. "But for my family, I'll overcome any obstacle." Hearing this, Rui immediately asks, "Where's Daddy?" Shinn promises they will see him very soon. Meanwhile, Ching steps aside, her mind reeling. A traitor from inside the Black Armor Army was unthinkable, but her resolve hardens. She will protect his family until he returns. Later, a bound Azure is thrown into the office. Ching demands the truth. The man scoffs. "I have no family, no friends. The only thing you can threaten me with is my own life." The cold steel of her blade presses against his throat. "That's fine," she says, her voice like ice. "If you don't want to talk." She pries open his mouth, pulling out a hidden device, crushing it in her hand. She finds a data card with information on who ordered the betrayal. The officer finally breaks. The only one who can truly rival Ching is the White Tiger. Her subordinate can't believe it. "An envoy of the White Tiger? That's impossible." "The real envoy," the man gasps, "is in the Northwest." The scene cuts away. To the main character's team. They've arrived at a settlement of the Snake Tribe. Long cautiously knocks on a villager's door, listening for any sign of life. The force of his knock dislodges a firearm which clatters to the ground. Just then, Yubing's eyes widen as she spots something and darts away. "What is it?" Long asks. "Don't touch it," she warns, pointing to a strange lizard on the ground. Long murmurs. "Look at its eyes. There's an unusual glint in them." Lin interrupts, grabbing the fallen gun. "We should focus on the house." As he moves to enter, Yubing stops him. "Wait, we should surround and investigate first." But the main character shakes his head. "Hesitation only announces our presence. We're going in now." Long notices Yubing's uneasy expression. "What are you hiding from us?" Suddenly, a powerful explosion rips through the wall where the lizard disappeared. There's no doubt now. Someone is on the other side. Maybe we should have listened to Yubing. Long thinks. The mercenary tries to bolt, but his path is blocked by a warrior of the Snake Tribe. Lin unleashes his lightning power, thrusting his hand into the breach. The wall shatters, revealing a horrifying sight: a corpse covered in reptilian scales. Nurba rushes forward to examine the body. A look of horror crosses her face. "He's one of my people." The main character connects the dots. That lizard was this man. The chilling possibility dawns on everyone. Nurba spins on Yubing, her voice filled with rage. "You did this. You turned my people into lizards." Long grabs the mercenary, his grip like iron. "Start talking, or else."
Nurba offered her tribesmen a final, solemn farewell. While the Snake Tribe watched, their faces etched with shock and betrayal.
A twisted, satisfied smile crept across Ying's face. In the next moment, the corpse before them began to swell. its skin blistering until it exploded in a gruesome display. The protagonist's team stared, completely stunned by the horror, enraged. The tribe leader roared, threatening to tear Yibing apart with his bare hands. Long kept a firm grip on her, ensuring she couldn't escape, refusing to wait another second. Nerba charged forward, her staff held high. The mercenary slammed her knee into Long's stomach to break free, then whipped out a hidden gun and aimed it squarely at Nerba. Instantly, Lin and Fun raised their own pistols, locking her in their sights. The hero's voice cut through the tension, warning her not to make a fatal move. She relented, throwing the gun to the ground with a clatter. The hero ordered everyone to stand down, giving Yibing a chance to explain. The mercenary then confessed everything. She was an envoy of the White Tiger, a double agent. For years, the northwest border had been a land of endless war, a bloody stage for the Sandwolves, the Snake Tribe, and countless other clans. Ying's voice dripped with bitterness as she explained that ordinary people like her were the ones who truly suffered from this endless conflict. She confessed that she had once lost all hope, until the White Tiger appeared, saving not only her, but her entire village. From that day on, she became his loyal shadow. His orders were simple: infiltrate the Sandwolves and wait for Lin's arrival. The shocking truth was revealed. The White Tiger was the true mastermind behind the Sandwolves, and his goal wasn't just to seize the Northwest. It was to find the protagonist. Lin stood in stunned silence. Ying then turned her venomous gaze on Nerba, accusing the Snake Tribe of burning her village and plundering her home. Nerba's face filled with sorrow. She admitted to the grave mistakes of her past, her voice heavy with regret. But Long refused to listen, screaming that her tragic past didn't justify this massacre. He threatened to empty his entire magazine into her. The protagonist quickly intervened, asking his friend to let the girl. The mercenary shoved Long away with surprising force, telling him to obey his chief. As a twisted reward for hearing her out, Ying revealed the locations of the other Snake Tribe members. With a snap of her fingers, bodies descended from the ceiling, bound and lifeless. The hero's blood ran cold. He finally understood. All of these people had been slaughtered by the very woman he had just protected. Fun asked how she turned people into those lizard creatures. Yibing coldly explained she used a special potion, a gift from her White Tiger Lord. Nerba called her a monster for her cruelty, but Ying merely smiled, saying it was exhilarating to watch people writhe until their humanity was gone. She added that killing the clan leaders was an even greater thrill. Lin couldn't believe he had been so blind to her disguise. Not even he, the Supreme, had sensed the darkness hiding within her. He accused her of siding with a traitor, but Yibing erupted in fury. She screamed that the White Tiger brought order to the Northwest, and no one had the right to insult him, especially Lin. She remembered the day her village was destroyed, how she wandered, covered in wounds, until she reached the territory of the Sandwolves. Just as some men tried to harm her, the White Tiger appeared like a god, effortlessly protecting her. Yibing admitted she had always felt invisible, but on that day, the White Tiger had looked at her, and for the first time, someone had called her by name. That is why she could never be the villain. It was the leader of the snakes who struck first, who destroyed her people and wiped out her entire family. Everything she had done since was to ensure that the names of the people she held dear would never be forgotten. Ying then turned her rage on the protagonist, accusing him of failing to save them when chaos consumed the Northwest. She shrieked that he had simply closed his eyes to their suffering. Fun noticed with alarm that Lin was losing his composure. The terrifying power of the Supreme began to leak from his body. His anger finally exploded, unleashing arcs of lightning that destroyed everything around them. The soldier held his aim on the traitor, asking if he should take the shot. In a shocking twist, Ying told them to fire, revealing that the transformation curse was directly linked to the White Tiger Lord himself. Now that he knew her location, her escape was impossible. At that exact moment, a dark swarm of manipulated birds blotted out the sky. Norba grew pale with dread, realizing these birds were moving under Yibing's direct command. She feared that the power of her staff had somehow been sealed by the White Tiger. A murderous aura flared around Lin as he ordered his allies to prepare for an enemy assault. The battle began in a flash. Long opened fire with his weapon, while Lin rained down devastating bolts of lightning from above. The sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. Long decided the only way to end it was to eliminate Yibing right now. But she just laughed, saying it was useless. Without negotiating with the White Tiger, she warned they were all doomed. She called him a fool for not understanding the true nature of the trap. Tired of the games, she turned to leave. But Long pulled the trigger. Aiming right for her face, in a blur, Fun redirected the bullet upwards, insisting they could solve this with words. Lin, however, knew that as long as the magic matrix stood, the monsters would never stop coming. He soared high above the clouds where the birds swarmed and activated the full extent of his lightning power. The monsters were utterly obliterated, and a rain of black feathers fell from the sky. Long praised his boss's incredible talent,
But Yibing sneered that it wouldn't work. This trap, she explained, had been specially prepared for them.
The team fought with every ounce of their strength, but Yibing simply taunted Lin, saying he still didn't understand the true nature of the Northwest. Distracted by her words, the soldier yelled for Fun to focus, but it was too late. A red-eyed bird broke from the swarm, piercing Long's neck with its beak.
Fun screams in terror as a monstrous bird descends, but the soldier moves faster, snapping its neck in an instant. Suddenly, a horrifying swarm attacks, painting the battlefield crimson. Long takes a brutal hit from behind, but refuses to fall. With his dying breath, he roars his conviction. Even in the next life, he would proudly serve as a soldier of his nation.
At last, his strength gives out and he collapses. Fang rushes to his side, but Nerba holds him back, warning him against a needless sacrifice. Lin becomes a whirlwind of death, cutting down bird after bird. Amidst the chaos, his communicator crackles to life. A desperate voice comes through the static, confirming their worst fears. The message is a dagger to the heart. Shinn and the little princess have been taken. The devastating news shatters Lin's focus. In that split second, the enemy mercenary strikes, trapping him in a circle of dark magic. A sinister thought echoes in her mind, mission accomplished. Meanwhile, Qing delivers another crushing report. Wang has been assassinated. Dr. Li is critically wounded, and the lab, a legacy from the Supreme's wife, lies in ruins. And the most critical blow of all, every trace of the meteorite iron research has vanished. She had fortified the city to protect the girls, only to discover the White Tiger's agents were everywhere. Overwhelmed with guilt, Qing drops to her knees, begging for forgiveness for her failure. Trapped within the dark arts, Lin's voice is strained but firm. "Protect my family," he commands. A volcanic rage erupts from within him, his aura exploding and shattering the black magic to pieces. He lets out a heaven-shaking roar, his voice thundering with absolute fury. "How dare the Sandwolves lay a hand on my family!" Divine lightning descends from the heavens, striking Ying with apocalyptic force. She's incinerated, leaving only a skeleton behind. Nerba stares, utterly stunned by the Supreme's true power. Why? Fun feels the terrifying rage radiating from him. He knows in that instant, the White Tiger has just crossed a line from which there is no return. The pieces click into place for Lin. The entire Northwest battle was a meticulously crafted trap laid by Bai Hu from the very beginning. He was sent to crush the Sandwolves as a diversion, lured into no man's land to wipe out the Snake Tribe, leaving Binhai completely vulnerable to attack. Cradling Long's lifeless body, Lin is crushed by the weight of his own decision. He had invited his friend to his death. He turns to Nerba, asking to honor him with the burial rites of the Snake Tribe. Fun's heart aches, mourning not just Long, but also Nerba's loyal subordinate, who fell at the hands of Yi Bing. Slowly, the dust and smoke begin to settle. Lin delivers a grim warning to Nerba. The meteorite that suppressed their territory is gone. Now, this no man's land is once again alive with supernatural power. The conclusion is clear. The meteorite iron is the key to controlling the Northwest, and the White Tiger will use his entire army to seize it. Though his own power is not yet restored, Lin makes a solemn vow. He will do whatever it takes to save Ishin and Rui. The three survivors pile into the vehicle. Lin floors it, tearing through the desolate land. Nerba asks the question that hangs in the air. Is the White Tiger one of your own? The sting of betrayal is sharp in Lin's voice. His influence in the military, he says coldly. Once, there were 4 legendary generals Zheilong, Bai Hu, Shang, and Xuan Wu. Now, they each command their own separate forces. Zheilong has always been his loyal right hand. He believed the White Tiger remained in the west. But months ago, he received intelligence that his old comrade had moved to the northwest border. Fun admits he once held a naive hope that the Supreme and the White Tiger would find common ground, since both were orphans who rose from nothing. He jokes grimly, maybe the man is just obsessed with his own cultivation. Nerba finds no humor in his words. Cultivator or not, she vows with cold fury, I will end him. Lin suspects a deeper connection, a link between the White Tiger's rebellion and Shen Yan. The scene then shifts to a tranquil waterfall, proving Fun's joke was closer to the truth than he knew. There, the White Tiger is deep in meditation, his focus so intense he slices the falling water with pure will. A messenger dares to interrupt, reporting that Yi Bing completed her mission, but was eliminated. The messenger then asks timidly, will she be honored as a martyr? With a flicker of irritation, the White Tiger shatters the rock he sits on. His voice is ice. Who? The messenger trembles. She was our agent inside the Sandwolf squad. The White Tiger gives a single, chilling order. Bring me the sergeants. Back in the Northwest, Fun finishes loading the last of their supplies. This time, he will journey with the Snake Tribe's leader alone. He looks to Nerba, asking one last time, "Are you sure you won't join me in the meteorite space?" But she remains silent, her heart still heavy with the loss of her subordinate. The scene cuts away to the gleaming towers of Binhai City. For the main character, there is no other path. He must return home and save his family, no matter the cost. He receives a report from his subordinate. Azure had laid an ambush in the parking lot. Ching, in a daring move, pretended to walk right into it, hoping to expose the traitor. During the chaos, the little princess unleashed her power, using electromagnetism to manipulate Azure's movements. A move that unfortunately drew the White Tiger's gaze. In that moment, the trap was sprung. Rebels loyal to the White Tiger swarmed in, surrounding them all. Rui tried to fight back with her powers, but the rebels were prepared. They used meteorite fragments to nullify her energy and seized both her and Shinn. Dr. Lee was gravely injured trying to protect them. Once again, Ching kneels, begging for punishment, but Lin stops her. "This isn't your fault. This was all part of the White Tiger's grand design." He asks the only question that matters. "Where are my wife and daughter?" When she replies that she doesn't know, Lin's command is absolute. "Find them. By the end of today." He voices his deepest fear a potential alliance between the White Tiger in the northwest and the dangerous Shen Yan in the capital. King reports her intelligence shows no contact yet between Bai Hu and Shen Yan. But suddenly, a savage roar tears through the air, cutting their conversation short. Ching whirls around to see a pack of wolves, eyes glowing, ready to attack. Yet the protagonist remains perfectly still. It is Ching who instantly moves to shield him, her body a ready defense. Seeing her loyalty sparks an idea in Lin's mind. A new strategy begins to form. Why face two enemies at once? It would be far better to divide them and use Shen Yan's own power to— Without a moment's hesitation, he orders Ching to go after his wife and daughter. And just like that, the girl vanishes without a trace. Now, our hero declares he will put an end to these rabid dogs himself. The scene shifts to the Imperial Palace. Word reaches Shenyan that Lin has returned to Binhai City. The Dragon Lord wonders what the Supreme could possibly be planning. His attendant explains that Baiyu used the Supreme's absence to capture his family, assuming Lin has returned to rescue them. Shenyun scoffs, questioning how Baiyu could ever manage to capture someone under Qing's protection. But his amusement fades as a chilling possibility dawns on him. Is Baiyu making a move to occupy Binhai City? The servant's next report makes Shenyun's wine glass shatter on the floor. His spy confirmed that the Black Armor Army is now completely controlled by the White Tiger. The Dragon Lord roars, demanding to know what that madman is plotting. His attendant replies that the motive is unknown, but they've confirmed the hostages were taken to that location. Shenyun feels a storm brewing. Soon, no one will be able to stop these men, especially not the White Tiger, who now commands the hero's old squad. It seems even the Supreme's authority is being mocked. His servant notes that Lin now only has Qing by his side. Shenyun wonders if he can truly crush them with a wave of his hand. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the hero finds his path blocked. An oppressive aura washes over the guards, and they know instantly who stands before them. Lin ignores their words and strides into the castle. Shenyun was expecting him and grants him entry to the chamber. The protagonist sits, completely at ease, as the Dragon Lord remarks that it's been a while since they met in person. Lin addresses him as the young emperor, stating that he must already know the reason for his visit. He cuts straight to the point he came to borrow his troops, and it will not be for nothing. The hero vows that once his family is safe, he will pacify the Northwest and stabilize the entire Imperial Kingdom. Shenyun asks coolly if the Supreme is in such a hurry. Lin replies that forces across the districts are ready to act and cannot wait much longer. This would be catastrophic for Shenyun, as his throne would be in danger. The Dragon Lord realizes that even without his wife and daughter, the Supreme has not lost his fangs. Without wasting another second, he agrees to lend his troops. But on one condition, the first wave must be his electromagnetic force. Lin understands his hidden meaning. Shenyun is speaking of the ultimate sacrifice. He decides he will reveal the truth about the electromagnetic force when the time is right. So Shenyun gives the royal family's insignia to our hero. Lin says his farewells and leaves the palace. It proves that no matter how powerful a man is, his heart can turn him into a puppet. On any other day, the Supreme would never seek help from his enemy. A few minutes later, the hero gets a call in his car. His wife and daughter have been located. They're being held at the Exotic Matter Research Facility. Qing reports that the security around the building appears to be light, so it's likely a trap set by Baiyu. Lin scoffs, saying such a petty trick is meaningless before him. He gives his orders assemble the soldiers and dispatch them to the laboratory. The scene cuts to Rui inside an analysis tube. Baiyu is shocked that her electromagnetic force hasn't reacted. He speculates that she is simply too young, her electromagnetic energy not yet fully developed. In that moment, Baiyu learns that the protagonist has returned to Binhai City and is coming straight for him. Stunned by the Supreme's speed, he immediately calls his ally. The White Tiger answers, demanding they transfer Lin's family as hostages. Baiyu asks if the trap is ready. The response is a confident yes. Suddenly, a loud noise from the ceiling draws their attention. They both look up, demanding to know what is happening. Through a cloud of smoke, a desperate servant screams that the building is surrounded by the Dragon Lord's envoys.
They've blown the entrance wide open and are preparing to attack.
Bayou remains arrogant, believing he has the ultimate advantage with the Supreme's wife and daughter. Meanwhile, outside, the Dragon Lord's soldiers attack with precision. A report comes in all enemies in Area A have been eliminated. Now, all that remains is to breach the gate. In a matter of seconds, the soldiers succeed. The protagonist is advised to enter, as Ching confirmed the lab is just beyond the wall. The hero nods, and as he enters, he unleashes a torrent of energy at the enemies who were once part of his own squad. He follows the blast with brutal hand-to-hand combat. He roared at his former comrades, his voice thick with betrayal. How dare they raise their swords against the very leader they once served? The defeated soldier could only gasp that he was following orders. At those words, the Supreme's punishing blows ceased. He turned away, his voice cold as ice, asking if the man still wished to fight. But the soldier simply gave a warning. Shinn and the princess were in the lab opposite. His men warned it was surely a trap, but the protagonist scoffed, knowing it was just another one of their pathetic tricks. He placed his hand on the scanner without a flicker of doubt. The heavy doors hissed open, granting him entry. Lin's soldiers stayed on high alert as a thick fog flooded the chamber. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut behind them, and from the darkness, a single silhouette emerged. The protagonist's world narrowed to a single horrifying sight. His wife and daughter, unconscious and trapped within a sinister machine. Bahu spread his arms in a mocking welcome, declaring how pleased he was that the Supreme had finally appeared.
A roar of pure anguish tore from Lin's throat as he tried to wake them. Blinding rage erupted into a storm of lightning aimed at Bahu, but the man dodged effortlessly, taunting the Supreme for being so weak.
Lin pressed his attack, refusing to yield an inch. But in that instant, a strange portal warped into existence beside him. Bahu admitted with a smirk that he hadn't expected the Supreme to wield electromagnetic force while under the meteorite's suppression field. Perhaps, he mused, it's because you are the key. Lin wondered what nonsense he was spouting, until the chilling realization hit him. Bahu had the meteorite. The enemy let out a crazed laugh, declaring that the meteorite was just the start. Soon, the entire world would belong to the White Tiger Lord. In that moment, he snatched something from his pocket and hurled it violently onto the ground. A thick purple cloud of smoke instantly filled the room, completely obscuring the protagonist's vision. He knew at once it was a poisonous mist and roared for his soldiers to cover their faces. A deep disappointment washed over him. They were once as close as master and student, but that bond was now ash. He pushed past the traitor and finally recovered his family. Later that day, his wife and daughter were rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, Dr.
Lee had fully recovered and was personally watching over Shinn and Rui. The main character could finally breathe, knowing they would soon wake up.
Just then, Chin appeared with a grave report for the Supreme. The Black Armor Army was completely under the enemy's control, and Bahu had vanished. Lin's expression hardened. He needed to know where the meteorite came from. His subordinate reported it was brought from the Serpent Tribe's territory, and the lab was a front for researching control over electromagnetic force. In a flash of fury, the protagonist slammed his fist into the wall, crumpling the steel. It was all clear now. Bahu was nothing but the White Tiger's puppet. For Lin, the truth was undeniable. The White Tiger's ambition had no limits. He had crossed the final line by dragging Shinn and Rui into his schemes. Bahu might feel invincible with the Black Armor Army at his command, but his reign would be short-lived. The conversation quickly shifted, focusing on a single objective: how to hunt down the White Tiger. Suddenly, his wife stirred, and he was startled by her voice. Shinn threw her arms around him, overcome with relief, whispering that he was finally back. Lin held her tightly, apologizing for taking so long. They spoke for a long moment. She felt no pain, but her real relief came from seeing him completely unharmed. At that moment, their daughter quietly entered the room. Joy washed over both parents' faces at the sight of her. Shinn's heart felt whole again. The Supreme turned to his wife, his voice soft, telling her just how much he had missed her. He couldn't hide his burning need to protect them, explaining that this was why he had to leave. He stroked her hand, making a solemn vow. Once Shanann and Bahu were gone, they would live together in peace, forever. His wife looked at him with absolute faith, wishing him luck and promising to wait for his return. Rui proudly declared that her father would definitely be the winner. On the hospital roof, an aircraft descended. Lin's purpose was clear. He would shatter the iron meteorite and bring peace to the nation. He turned to Ching, asking if Shinn and the princess were safely at the secure location. Lin confirmed it, reminding her that Rui's power was a beacon for their enemies. Ching's mission was to stay behind and command their protection at all costs. He told her that once the dust settled, she was to meet him in the northwest. The scene shifts to the desolate northwest. where members of the Sandwolf squad cackle over their newest prize, a beautiful noblewoman.
Nerba found herself surrounded by the vile men. Before she could react, a gunshot rang out. A bullet tore through her shoulder, and her world went black.
The mercenaries debated what to do next. One of them, holding Nerba's staff, suggested tying her up and taking her to their leader. But as they readied to leave, a massive sword plummeted from the heavens, obliterating their vehicle in a fiery explosion. They whirled around, searching for the attacker, but saw no one. Then, from the shadows, a figure in reinforced armor emerged to retrieve the colossal blade. The mercenaries opened fire, unleashing a hail of bullets. But the hooded warrior swung his blade so fiercely that flames erupted from the steel itself.
In mere moments, half the mercenaries were cut down. The others fled like cowards, hiding behind rocks, only to be hunted down one by one.
The armored man saw a few grunts escaping in the last vehicle, but he let them go. They weren't his real target. He grabbed one of the surviving thugs, demanding to know what happened to the Serpent Tribe's territory. Trembling, the man confessed that the White Tiger had destroyed it all and plundered their resources.
With a voice like cold steel, the warrior demands an answer. Why did they capture Nerba?
The mercenary flinches from the blade's edge, stammering that it was a mistake. They just found her and carelessly tossed her staff aside.
A breath of pure rage escapes the warrior as he turns his back on them.
Meanwhile, at China's central training base, Qin ushers Shinn into a fortress, calling it the safest place in the entire country. The very ground where the Supreme once trained his troops. Qin asks if this was all according to Lin's plan. His subordinate confirms it, telling her not to worry. They are protected by Xiao Ying, Lin's former right-hand man and a master of electromagnetic force. Relief washes over Shinn. She trusts him completely, but wishes she could do more for her husband.
Just then, a memory sparks. He asks if she remembers the necklace her father once gave to Rui. She admits she could never decipher the ancient relic. Qin suggests asking Xiao Ying, who might just understand its secrets. Shinn's eyes light up at the idea. The scene then shifts to the next day. Deep within the Snake Tribe's territory, the armored giant is cooking lunch, boiling a serpent in a pot when voices drift on the wind. The main character walks alongside a village elder. The old man informs the Supreme that his friend vanished after leaving the Northwest, and the Sandwolf squad has been eerily quiet ever since. He continues, saying that yesterday, a towering warrior with a fierce gaze descended from the sky. He slept in the square with a colossal sword. Doing nothing, the villager simply points toward the mysterious figure. Lin approaches him. Xuan Wu, it's been too long. The warrior removes his helmet, explaining he cut ties with Bai long ago. Recently, that traitorous leader incited the Black Armor Army to rebel, and now they hunt Xuan Wu as a fugitive.
He has been searching for Lin ever since he heard of his awakening. But when the main character asks about Suzaku, a heavy silence falls between them. The elder offers them water, then asks why Master Xuan Wu is carrying the staff of the Snake Tribe's leader. The armored warrior explains he recovered it upon his arrival, just as soldiers were attempting to capture Nerba. Lin's expression turns grim. He warns his friend that Nerba, the staff, and the meteorite are all deeply connected. The White Tiger likely needs all three to advance his twisted plan. Xuan Wu agrees. It's impossible to cross the meteorite without Nerba. The scene cuts to the Sandwolf territory. Nerba hangs helpless from a wooden cross, a prisoner watched by mercenaries. Our hero knows it's a trap, but retreat is not an option. Xuan Wu receives the order and plummets from the sky, crashing into the enemy ranks like a meteor. The impact sends bodies flying and springs their trap. A storm of bombs rains down from above as Lin screams for his partner to fall back.
A dark silhouette appears atop Sandwolf Castle. A man mocks our hero, asking if he really thought he could just break in.
He points to the side, revealing hostages Lin had once saved, now threatened with their lives all over again. The retired soldier shoots one of them and warns the Supreme not to take another step. But Lin ignores him, his fury boiling over. The old soldier conjures a blinding sandstorm, masking their movements. The main character realizes they're using it to compensate for the power outage. He roars that he will handle the situation, while his partner rescues the hostages. Xuan Wu grips his massive sword and charges headfirst into danger. Bombs explode all around, but he leaps fearlessly through the flames. The castle's assault intensifies, shaking the very ground. The main character warns his friend not to overdo it. With a mighty heave, Xuan Wu stabilizes the platform holding the hostages, buying just enough time. The plan works. But the old soldier has one more trick up his sleeve. Suddenly, the ground beneath the Supreme collapses. The real trap is revealed. A terrifying underground crusher. The old soldier makes his escape on an airship, laughing as Lin is swallowed by the shifting sands. Struggling as he's pulled down, something in the sky catches his eye. Huge birds swoop down from above, lifting him from the jaws of the trap, and they are all being controlled by Nerba herself. Are you enjoying this thrilling story so far? Make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment to let me know what you think.
About this amazing manhwa,